agriculture and business management through capacity development, research, innovation, and technology transfer for enhanced food security. AgroScience Park seeks to attract private investors to transform innovative ideas to viable agribusinesses. As TagDev, we are keen to foster transformation at individual, community, institutional, and sector levels. However, we can do this better when we all work together: universities, TVETs, private sector, and the government. In the spirit of promoting innovation, nurturing talents, and promoting entrepreneurship, TagDev program has supported several innovations developed by students from different departments. Together.
Cassava value chain upgrading for secure food, nutrition, income, and resilience of smallholder farmers in the assaults of Nakuru County. Farmer trainings. Farmers have been trained on cassava production and management. These trainings include value addition for cottage and processing endeavors. By end of the second year of engagement, 571 farmers have directly participated in the project. Many more farmers, estimated at 4,300, have been reached indirectly through distribution of cassava cuttings and farmer-to-farmer contacts. Farmer participatory variety evaluation and selection. The project introduced and evaluated 27 sweet cassava varieties collected from Busia, Migori, Kakamega, and Karonjoro. Nakuru, being a non-traditional cassava growing area, meant the project had to evaluate all production, consumption, and parameters of the cassava varieties introduced. 9 sites, 3 in each of 3 sub-counties, were introduced: Njoro Sub-County, Lare, Subukia Sub-County, Lower Subukia, and Rongai Solai. Adaptability in terms of survival, yield, food safety, cyanide accumulation, and quality for processing suitability have been evaluated. Of the varieties and sites, the following selections were made. Subukia made the following selections: Lare made the following selections: and Solai made the following selections. Bulking. These selected varieties are being bulked for wider distribution to farmers in the respective locations.
University is often seen as a place confined in time. Hardly do we think about the feelings of a community, accomplishment, promise, and belonging that comes with it. At Egerton University, we find your passions, your dreams, aspirations, and water them to fruitfulness. We help you find yourself and mold you into an all-round individual. Experience professionalism. Experience practicality. Experience fun. Experience Egerton University. To apply for our programs, please visit application.egerton.ac.ke. Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education.
More than 60% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa are smallholder farmers, and about 23% of sub-Saharan Africa's GDP comes from agriculture. Yet, Africa's full agricultural potential remains untapped. Well, the project Transforming African Agricultural Universities to Meaningfully Contribute to Africa's Growth and Development, TAGDEV, is here now, day by day from 2016, contributing to Africa's growth and development by transforming African agricultural universities, student by student. Implemented at the premier agricultural university in Kenya, Egerton University, TAGDEV has over the years from 2016 designed ways to achieve this transformation by 2024. There is no better way to spearhead this than supporting the training of 110 students, 55 masters and 55 undergraduates at Egerton University. We provide full scholarships to academically gifted but economically challenged students with a passion to make agricultural transformation in Africa a reality. We participate in conferences such as Rule Forum AGM in 2019, where we share on the actions we are taking to transform African agricultural universities and organize the National Fora for Agricultural Universities and their stakeholders held annually since 2018. At TAGDEV, we are guided by the following objectives. Pilot a new model of agricultural education which focuses on agribusiness or entrepreneurship, experiential learning, and community engagement. Scale out the new model for agricultural education to other agricultural universities and TVET institutions. Increase collaboration and mutual learning among institutions and agencies implementing and influencing innovative tertiary agricultural education for rural transformation in Africa. We have been doing this by conducting retooling workshops to equip staff with the necessary tools, skills, and knowledge that will improve the teaching approaches geared towards producing graduates who are change agents with the ability to catalyze rural transformation. Students get involved in various out-of-class activities organized by private sector players, Ministry of Agriculture, county governments, and other agricultural stakeholders. During these activities, they get a chance to learn more on current advances in agriculture and also showcase to the world their inventions. Central to TAGDEV are the community action research projects that engage directly with rural communities and serve to facilitate linkages with key agricultural service providers. In Egerton University, other projects have also risen, all looking at boosting Africa agriculture-wise. This include the Center of Excellence in Livestock Innovation and Business, COELIB, building on existing knowledge and capacity to foster innovation and business-oriented actions. The African Center of Excellence in Sustainable Agriculture and Agribusiness Management, SESAM, contributes to sustainable agriculture and business management through capacity development, research, innovation, and technology transfer for enhanced food security. AgroScience Park seeks to attract private investors to transform innovative ideas to viable agribusinesses. As TAGDEV, we are keen to foster transformation at individual, community, institutional, and sector levels. However, we can do this better when we all work together: universities, TVETs, private sector, and the government. In the spirit of promoting innovation, nurturing talents, and promoting entrepreneurship, TAGDEV program has supported several innovations developed by students from different departments. Together.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 2 of our conference. This is Egerton University for the National Forum. The theme is Food Systems and Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Development. Today we shall be having in the morning session 2 presenters, but before that, I would like to remind our viewers that the proceedings of this conference are live on social media. Then you are encouraged to use the Q&A chat box. And whenever you do that, please indicate which question and the person intended to respond to. My name is Professor Charles Torumba. I will be the moderator for the day. To start our day, let's have a recap of yesterday's proceedings from Professor Wilkista N. Muturi. Professor, you are welcome.
Good morning. I want to give the recap for yesterday's sessions, and I'll start with the welcoming remarks that were given by Professor Mungai, Professor Kibwage, and Dr. Egeru. The highlights were that there's need for universities to transform from traditional roles to finding a place in advancing innovation and industry. TAGDEV alumni can develop into people who can nurture innovations and create jobs. And then with over 200 academic programs, Egerton University is committed to be dynamic and continue to be leaders of innovation. Then we had the chief guests' presentations for the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. We had Mr. Lawrence Karanja as the representative, and highlights from his presentation are that we need to create synergy between industry and universities. The Constitution protects intellectual property rights, and strategies are in place to actualize it. There is need to integrate entrepreneurship in the learning process.
Hello, good morning. We can't
Entrepreneurship culture being created by programs in Egerton were commended. The Ministry of Industrialization is willing to connect academia and industry so as to enhance the triple helix and churn out productive graduates. Then we had the keynote address by Mrs. Jenga, who was representing the CAS Agriculture, Ms. Ann Nyaga, and these were the highlights. Food security targets to support the Big Four agenda were reported. 9 flagship critical in addressing systemic bottlenecks in agriculture were also highlighted.
We have lost the sound.
600,000 jobs to be created by the Ministry of Agriculture through 13 projects under different value chains. The Ministry of Agriculture has initiatives towards attainment of 100% food and nutrition security, and strategies to increase youth engagement in agriculture were extensively highlighted. And we were also taken through ways in which the ministry has put in place mechanisms of farmers to keep their produce in certified warehouses during periods of glut. Then we had the presentation from KEPSA by Ms. Carol Karaoke, and these were the highlights of her presentation. The constraints faced by farmers is stifling innovations, and several constraints were presented. The private sector is ready to partner with universities to enhance innovations, and KEPSA is willing to do the facilitation. KEPSA was part of the rebranding of the 4K clubs in schools, and this venture was led by His Excellency the President. Several university industry collaboration areas were highlighted, and the strategies of multiplying innovations by partnering with private sector were highlighted. Then we had the panel discussion where we had representatives from counties, Dr. Ario from Marsabit County, Dr. Tarus from Uasin Gishu, and Dr. Maina from Nakuru County. And in addition, we had Professor Ouma from Egerton. And they were discussing broad topic on youth devolution and agri-food systems in Kenya. These were the highlights. It was seen that the farming community, it is an aging one, and very few young people are doing farming. The counties were focusing on farming enterprises best suited for the ecological zones. Devolution was bearing some fruit in agriculture to some extent, but there are indications that there is still room for improvement. Challenges in various counties were highlighted, and county-specific strategies were presented. Concerted efforts are being put in place to involve the youth in agriculture, and these were highlighted by the presenters. It was also noted that the youth don't have stakes in management of the high-value crops and the plantation crops because they were more or less offering labor. It was also indicated that creating a circular economy in agri-enterprises is a strategy that should be explored for involving youth in agriculture. Marketing and formation of farmer groups is the best way to deal with exploitation by middlemen. Then we had a youth who presented, who made a presentation on how the youth can contribute to agri-food systems. And these were the highlights, that the youth are capable of contributing towards agri-food systems and enterprises. Youth contribution in agriculture in the rural areas is undervalued and not quantified, that there is need to change the mindset of youth in order to have them involved in agriculture. Exposure to good practices in agriculture is an important factor in influencing youth towards appreciating agriculture as an enterprise. Then we had the wrap-up session from Professor Rewe. He enumerated in brief what had been presented, and what I captured, or what I'm leaving you with, is a slogan from one of Dr. Rewe's slides, that the youth are information and technologies. I wish you a good day, and may we have an interactive session. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nancy, for that elaborate recap of yesterday's proceedings. To start our day, we shall have Professor Nancy Mungai, who will make some welcome remarks. Professor Nancy Mungai is Program Coordinator, TAGDEF. She is also Acting Director Research, Egerton University. She has a PhD in Soil Science from University of Missouri, Columbia, that is USA. Previously served as the Director Board of Undergraduate Studies, Egerton University for 9 years. Professor Nancy Mungai, you are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mevimba. I hope you can hear me. I thank you all. I also pray that I see we're having a challenge with the sound. We'll look into it to see how it can be fixed. But let me start off this morning by welcoming you all to this day 2 of the National Forum for Agriculture. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you.
Professor, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. So let me welcome you to the second day of the National Forum for Agricultural Stakeholders. Yesterday we had a very productive day, like has been presented by Professor Blakista, and was very ably summarized yesterday by Professor Rewe from Kwani University. And I think mine today is just to continue urging us as we continue to attentively listen to the presentations today, considering what we already had yesterday, is how we develop actions to follow up on this program. Like I indicated yesterday, is that these national forums were created, or we started them off so that we can engage with various stakeholders in the agricultural sector, in engaging in being able to get to know the status where we're doing well in terms of productivity, capacities, the data that is available, but also maybe learn also about the challenges that are happening and more importantly, come up with solutions. Productive agriculture after their training and create enterprises. That is one of the issue of the fact that some of our graduates are involved in their steps, but we need to reflect and see where we do the value chain and that currently involved in the lower end of the value chain rather than at the managerial or business area, and so that's something that we need to then ensure that our students when they go out there they will have a rightful place so as there was also the issue of connecting with the ministry and what the ministry is doing, and the ministry the discussion on food systems in Kenya, so it's around so I just want to welcome us today to this second day of the National Forum, and I just focus on the actions which we take together to contribute so I wish us all very
Thank you, Professor Nancy Mugai, for those opening remarks. To start off is Professor Darius Adika from Jaramogi Oginga University of Science and Technology, who will be giving a keynote speech on contribution of emerging food systems to food security. He is an associate professor, as I have said, at Juhust. He is also Director, Africa Center of Excellence in Sustainable Use of Insects as Food and Feed. He has a PhD in horticulture operations and MSc in ornamental horticulture. Has been involved in university teaching since 2003. Research focuses on cropping systems in the tropics. Professor Darius Adika, you are welcome to give your speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Egerton team, for the warm welcome. Happy to be part of this interactive session, youth involvement in agriculture, and warm greetings from Jaramogi Oginga University of Technology. Currently, I'm presenting from Mombasa, and therefore I also present greetings to the people coast. I want to go straight to my topic of today, contribution of emerging food systems to food security. Now, when I was talking about this topic, so many things came into my mind. I went back to the concept of value chain, which has been mentioned several times by previous speakers, and I think the relationship between value chain and the food system. Then I went further and thought about what exactly drives the concept of food system. How are we contributing as individuals, as human beings? Then the concept of dietary choices came in prominent. And the question I want to pose to you, as you listen to my presentation, is how is the choice of food influencing the food system? How is it influencing how the food is being produced, how the food is being imported, how the food is being prepared, how the food is being served, and how do you even eat that food? And have you ever imagined that the kind of food you eat, who told you to eat that kind of food? The reason behind the kind of food you eat. And right now most of you are in Egerton, but when you leave Egerton and come to coast, for example in Kilifi County, where they are eating caterpillars, will you be able to eat caterpillars? So then who really influences how you choose the kind of food you eat? And if you can be able to answer that question, then you should be able to understand the concept of food system and the role you can play as an individual, as an institution, and also at a national level. And therefore, we found that up to date, as we are speaking today, the concept of food system has actually been complete, and most of us, even our discussion this morning, we see we are focusing more on agriculture, which is a very, very small portion of the system. Within the chain, agriculture plays a very small role, which is key, great. But what other role do other sectors play within the food system concept? So what happens in between the production and the plate? Nothing much known about that level of the food system. Yet it plays very, very. And as we speak about food systems, my dear colleagues, by 2050, we have almost 10 billion people in the world. And the question we should be asking is, will we be able, with the food security, will food be available for the 10 billion people? Will the food be accessible for the 10 billion people? What about the utilization? The methods of consumption, the methods of preparing, the methods of presentation, we need to be appealing so that you find that under food choices, you are able to choose a wide range of food that is presented on the table. And with those systems, it's stable to ensure quality of food being produced throughout the season. So what's the key message? The key message that comes to a mind when we talk about food system is that progress has been made, and I'm happy to note what Egerton has done, tag them what we have been able to do. But we are still talking about by listening to the presentation, that audio by the tag dev team is that hunger and nutrition still remains a major challenge in sub-Saharan Africa. question is why? The global food system is vulnerable. The method of food is vulnerable. Yet, you have 10 billion people are fed in the next few years. Therefore, what do we need to do? We need to rethink and shape our food system, which is very, very critical. And this is embedded in our SDGs, which half of them actually are on focus on food systems, as we are going to see some slides. Therefore, the food system as it is currently at global level, we have quite a number of challenges. We have just seen population is growing, and by 2050 we will be around 10 billion. And therefore, we need mechanisms of food production that are going to be able to ensure this population has enough food on the table, which is accessible, and also is available most of the time, and which is nutritious. My dear colleagues, climate change and extreme weather events are a concern. Currently, as we are speaking right now, we all know that Germany, I think for the first time after several years, is also struggling to get aid to assist in some of the climate change. Floods are all over. You can see Austria, the neighbors, Netherlands, they are all affected. And for the first time, young youth will agree that they have seen in Europe, in Germany, a very developed country, people are moving away and they're being carried and they're actually dying out of floods. Something nobody could think of. Growing people have been forcefully misplaced and they are being called refugees simply because of the persistent conflicts which are going on. And a good example is our neighbors here in Ethiopia. You can see what's happening in Tigray, and you can imagine how are those people eating. And therefore, if they even had a clear food system, can it sustain that kind of, can it be sustainable under that kind of environment? Then agriculture-related food safety scandals. Safety issues have been a concern in the current food systems. And therefore, this is something that we need to clear, and we need to agree and have trade-offs on what is safety and the kind of levels of safety standards that we actually can agree on. So we have some guiding principles. And the global food system, as we refer to it right now, it must be able to deliver and contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, which should be able to be inclusive. The food system should be able to be nutritious and healthy. The food system should be able to guarantee climate smart sustainability, should be able to foster business-friendly environment, and of course, it should be productive and sustainable. And this goes directly into goal number 1 on poverty, goal number 2 on hunger, and goal number 15 on sustainable life on land. If we are able to sustain life on land, then my dear colleagues should be able to produce food that's enough for all the for the 10 billion people we are projecting to have by 2050. Therefore, when we are looking at food system, we need to broaden our minds beyond the value chain to consider natural elements. Natural elements here, for a very long time, we have not really considered use of air, soils, of course, ecosystem benefits, water, climate. They play a very key role in a food system. Then societal elements, the policies and the laws that we have in place, are they encouraging food production? Are they promoting a variety of food systems? Then we have what we call cost systems. And this goes together with behavior. As you can see, behavior here of the actors play a very key role, and it's between you and me. How we behave will clearly define the food system, or rather the contribution of the food system to food security and whether it's sustainable or not. Because we have a variety of value chains that are available that can be used as food, but we have decided to only consider cultural dimension in determining the kind of food we eat. And because of that, we are dying of poverty, we are dying of food insecurity, because we have a limited choice of food that we have that we can able to consume. So what are some of the pathways that we can use to develop the new food systems? We must promote investment in agriculture, research and development to ensure sustainable food production. I hope I'm still audible. Where I am, it's raining, so kindly just bear with me. And therefore, if you look at the programs at Egerton, you have been able to contribute immensely on intensification of agriculture, and SESAM has been able to do this. And these are some of the approaches that we need actually to promote research and development in agriculture. And currently, water is a major issue. And therefore, precision irrigation must be considered when you are considering a food system. Marketing and infrastructure. I hope I'm still audible. It's a bit. Marketing infrastructure.
Yes, you are.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Hello?
Yes.
Thank you. You've been trading heavily where I am. So, we also need to fix the fundamentals of marketing and infrastructure. Whereby we need to support the inclusive marketing in food value chain, and also we need to develop the rural infrastructure so that it can contribute immensely to the food system. We need to have transparent and fair trade. The policies that we develop should not be harmful, should be friendly. We need subsidies. And here we have done very poorly in sub-Saharan Africa in providing subsidies to our farmers so that they can produce enough. We need to create grain reserves. And this is something that it used to exist in olden days, but currently we don't have grain reserves. And this is contributing immensely to food insecurity in sub-Saharan Africa. More importantly, and this is where targeted will come in, apart from empowering women, youth can play a very, very key role in health and nutrition. And you want to agree with me that actually it is the women who determine the kind of food you eat in the houses. Rarely do men do this. And therefore, any program, any food system that need to be promoted must put women on the forefront. All this cannot happen without monitoring and evaluation. And the monitoring and evaluation should be able to monitor the global food system from production level, inclusivity, nutritional level, the climate level, sustainability level, and also a friendly level. So all these indicators should be considered when you are looking at the when you are monitoring and evaluating a food system. So all of them contribute to this achievement of food security. Therefore, what do we need to do? Any new food system should be able to focus currently on nutrition per unit of input or resources that we are available. My dear colleagues, we agree that resources are limited, and any input we put in terms of food production, it must be able to give back so that we are able to feed the 10 billion people. New frontiers in processing, storage, transportation should also be considered, so that we should be able to consume food from host region, from the Mombasa County, all the way in Western Kenya, so that the issues of accessibility of food should not be a challenge in the current century. Food losses. If you look at your morning breakfast, did you clear all the plate? Did you clear all the food you were given on your plate? This is a major issue and therefore need to be addressed in the current concept of food system. The linkage between consumers and the private sector. And I think Egerton, you have done very well here. It'll bring these people together, so that the consumer should be able to know what's happening at the farm level, and also at the private sector, the trader should also be able to know how the consumer is behaving at the other end when he's sitting down in the evening for take his meal. Then again, we must promote gender issues in agriculture, and TAGDEV thanks a lot for involving youth, because youth are the drivers of the current food systems as it is, because technology right now is playing a central role. And just to finalize, we cannot talk about sustainability if we don't have an innovation hub to manage all this information, to manage all the data that we are generating under different concepts, so that we can make informed decisions on what exactly, where we are and where we want to go in terms of food production to ensure food security for our growing population. My colleagues, I want to stop there. The topic of food concepts, or rather the food system, is so broad, and we can take a whole week just discussing the same topic. Others, with those few highlights, I want to thank you for this opportunity. And again, apologies for the rains. It's a bit abnormal that it's raining in Mombasa currently, but I hope you are able to get some of the messages. Thank you, and I wish to stop there.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for that stimulating presentation. Sorry for the rains at the coast. Here is sunny, and we are getting you clear. We also thank you for reminding us that women mediate pathways for agriculture.
Sound is gone.
Sorry? Sound is gone? Are you able to get me? Am I audible now? Okay, so I was just saying thank you for reminding us that women mediate pathways for agriculture to nutrition. Now, before I invite the next speaker, I just want to remind our viewers who have joined us that we are live on social media. And if you have any questions, please address them through Q&A, and then indicate to whom your question is directed to. Our next speaker for today will be Dr. David Mulama Amudavi. He will be giving a speech on key political factors in improving food system sustainability. And Daktari is the Executive Director of Biovision of Africa Trust, which is not a profit-making organization. He is also a project coordinator of the African Union-led Ecological Organic Agriculture Initiative, currently implemented in 9 countries. He has a PhD in adult and extension education from Cornell University, New York. Has 2-year postdoctoral fellow with ICIPES push-pull project. Dr. Mulama Amdavi, you are welcome to give your speech. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Are you able to hear me?
Hello, good morning. I can hear you, but perhaps you might need to remove the screen share from your end.
Are able to share, Dr. So try.
Okay.
Okay, we can see it.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to come and talk at a very important forum in my former university. When I was requested to make a talk to this forum last week on Thursday, I wasn't very sure whether at such a notice I would be able to say something. But then I was motivated by the motto of my high school, strong to serve, and I felt also have something to offer. So today I'm very privileged to the organizers of this forum to have invited me to come and share some thoughts on a very important topic on food systems. And this is coming at the right time when the United Nations is just preparing to have the United Nations Food System Summit in September this year. So I hope some of the key highlights that can come out of this meeting can get space in that forum. So I want to make a very brief presentation looking at the question I was asked, key political factors in improving food system sustainability. I'm not an expert in terms of political orientation, but I want to make my presentation in the context of where we are today in terms of our food systems, and in particular, look at the kinds of investments, where they're going, and then look at which direction do we need to go if we have to improve our food systems with better political governance and support. We are all aware of the numerous challenges that are facing our food system sustainability, and from yesterday's presentations and part of today, issues of low agricultural productivity, as we all know, is one of those that we are all struggling to address. And again, issues of food and nutritional insecurity as a result of low productivity. And all this happening against the background of increasing climate change effects, affecting biodiversity, affecting our land in terms of land degradation, and so on. And this making our communities suffer and experience very poor and sustainable livelihoods. Very important area that seems to be a challenge, which is contributing to some of these issues, are information and knowledge management deficiency. And I really appreciate that Egerton University is working on this area in order also to develop the very limited human capacity for management adaptation to improve the sector. Again, we are aware that lack of enabling policy frameworks play a huge role in limiting the scope to which we can improve our food systems. Now, we all are aware, as previous speakers just mentioned, indeed, there are many people becoming hungry every day. And this is happening not only globally, but also even within our own country. And this is because of various issues or factors that are happening everywhere. Just some of them I have indicated. Now, when it comes to the issue of food security, and my friend has gone a little bit deeper to elaborate what it is, in our case in Kenya, we tend to find our food system being quite traditional and, of course, having some elements of modern dynamics. And that means our food system tends to be largely informal and expanding to include systems that will say they're becoming formal. Now, our systems here in Kenya tend to be characterized by various elements, but we see quite widespread extreme poverty, and undernourishment. And this is an issue that has been going on in spite of the progress that we have made during the last 20 years, where food deficit has been reduced. I think the World Bank has actually some report on this. In 1990, we had kilocalories per person per day at 209, and now by 2016, that had come to 135. Quite a very good, impressive improvement. But still, the issue of extreme poverty and undernourishment is an issue that has to be addressed. Again, in our food systems, it is largely cereal-based, monocrops, maize, rice. And of course, this leads to frequent dietary inadequacy. And nutrition is a very important component of any human health, and therefore within the food system. Again, we are all aware that our food production is largely dominated by small farmers and livestock holders, and experiencing very low yields for reasons that are known to most of us. Yet, we know that our agriculture contributes to our country's GDP and takes quite a big chunk of our labor. Given the case, again, we find the food distribution in our country is largely informal, but of course, we have also seen changes happening, becoming more formalized, and this is through the development of markets, more marketing systems, and for the few who are able to get into more formal systems, into trade as well. So this is happening, and it's quite encouraging on that score. Now, in Kenya, our food, the hunger index has improved, but the question of food and nutrition insecurity still persists. This is very common, and for various reasons, some that we are all aware of. The poverty is still an issue. A lot of people are still poor. Low food safety. I'm very glad the previous speaker talked of, are we aware of what we eat? What comes from the farm to the table? Do anyone ever question, and especially those who are living in urban areas, where has this food been produced by who, and so on? The issues of traceability, trusting the sources of the food that comes to our table. Issues of low dietary diversity, among others, are some of those things that limit to improve our food and nutrition security. Now, we are aware, we have all been keen to see how we can revolutionize our agriculture, borrowing from the lessons of the Green Revolution promises. But here again, we've seen, whereas we've had some improvements, but they have also come with some environmental consequences and some of the effects that have affected the very farming fabric systems that we rely on. And again, the Green Revolution, we all know, encouraged dietary transition that reduced diversity for many groups of people and leading to some of the non-communicable diseases that are related to the lifestyle. Now, this has actually called for transformation of our food systems, and it has been gaining currency, not only in this country, not only in this region, but globally. Now, when it comes to transforming and sustaining food systems, this is an issue that is of importance in many countries, Kenya being no exception, to address the deeper pattern of malnutrition, obesity, and micronutrient deficiencies. And we need to do this while protecting our natural resources, which really form the bedrock of our agricultural development. And that means we need to ensure we have wholesome, nutrient-dense foods, and this is not just a matter of having the food security, but looking at the nutrition part, which is then linked to the health of people. And again, making sure that we are able to protect the natural resources we are using today, not only for our own use, but being careful of what the future is for our future generations as well. Ladies and gentlemen, in this moment of looking at our food systems, we've seen how a very important global shock, especially COVID-19, has tested the tenets, the resilience of our country in how we are responding to the Sustainable Development Goal number 2. And that is hunger, to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. This is an important goal that has been heavily affected, and we've seen this is happening almost everywhere. And it's a very important issue to revisit. And I'm glad the United Nations Food Summit is coming up and looking at how countries will be looking at their level of achievement of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But this particular one is primarily key to us, and especially in the context of our food systems. Now, in looking at this, then the question of how best do we look at improving our systems from political orientation. Now, I want just very briefly, I won't go into the details, to borrow from the political economy and the concept of food sovereignty. And this is where we are looking at, yes, it's important to look at the question of addressing food security and food nutrition. But then we also need to look at the question of not just being concerned on how much is being produced in terms of agricultural productivity, but asking very fundamental questions. And these are the questions that underpin the concept and practice of political economy. There are three questions. One, who controls food systems? This is an important question because it also means who controls the investments that go into the food systems. Two, who benefits from the current organization of food systems? And this underlines the interests of who controls the food systems. And lastly, what are the obstacles to change? If we want to improve things for the betterment of the public good, for everyone in public interest, what are the obstacles to that? I'm now reminded, therefore, with the investments that have been done in research, and this is part of IFPRI work that has shown, and this is quite encouraging for Kenya, as you can see, within Eastern Africa. Kenya is doing reasonably well. It has been investing quite a bit within the agricultural research, and we hope this translates into improving our food systems. I want to give just a few slides of work that has been shown on investments in the agricultural sector, and more so looking at the industrial agriculture and more sustainable agricultural systems that most countries are actually now vying to adapt within their systems. Now, for Kenya, as you can see, this is a study that was done looking at about 445 projects with a cumulative net budget of about $1.2 billion. And this shows very clearly that about 48% of this was on industrial agriculture only. And when it comes to the industrial agriculture only, it comes to the question of who is a major beneficiary of that. Is it the majority of our producers who are the small-scale holder farmers, or is it the very few large-scale corporate farmers? Now, inevitably, you can see from this, for the desired systems that we would like to see to support our food systems, those that look at the concept of the agro-system, the environment, we are looking at around 13%, and that is really not very encouraging. And if you look at the organizations that are funding this kind of work, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, if you look at the UK Aid, DFID, all these are most of the European corporate organizations that support a lot of work across even this continent. You can see most of the funding goes into industrial agriculture. And again, that is the question I raised earlier within the three questions of political economy. And it's the same way everywhere, even within the European Union. Most of the funding is actually going in areas for systems that are not really sustainable and that do not really support a lot of our smallholder farmers. And now this brings in the question of what is really behind the investments, what we call the money flows. Of course, the drivers of research and development are the political priorities and interests. The food security, of course, is core, and economic development. We find this being supported by lock-ins, the narratives of the Green Revolution, awareness of alternatives are lacking, and influential donors. But we find there are new openings through more multi-stakeholder participation, through looking at systems perspective, and the desire for developing resilient systems. This is opening new directions on looking at how do we manage our agricultural systems and our food systems. In this case, I want to say, therefore, within our context of having desired and improved food systems, we'd like to see how we can move from subsistence agriculture and not relying on industrial agriculture, where actually the majority of the smallholder farmers and our rural communities may not benefit much, to more diversified agroecological farming practices. And that is where I would like to see our food systems integrated, looking at the question of food security as well as the nutritional security. To do this, therefore, there are a few factors that I pulled together, not textbook, in looking at what are therefore the key political factors we need to consider and to take advantage of to improve our food system. One, is funding modalities and relationships, especially of donors and other corporate organizations, support research and development. If we have to improve on this, then we need to negotiate for long-term flexible arrangements, and where solidarity, and solidarity means really looking at almost everyone. Everyone counts within the food system, and accountability. Are we generating what is benefiting the majority of the people in the society? Two, structural inequalities and power imbalances. This is something that is happening, and even in this country, as we know, agriculture is an important sector, but it is having an investment of just less than 4% of our national budget, as opposed to the 10%, given our commitment that we signed for Malabo Declaration. And given the way we look at agriculture as the backbone of our economy, and being given such a minimal allocation, it is really an important political consideration. Then the issue of power in food systems, especially what I would call the private government, the few elements, few people who control the food systems and therefore control how much is invested in this. This is something that has to be looked at, and I'll provide some suggestions on how do we deal with this so that there is power deflation a little bit and everyone has a bit of a share within our food systems. The issue of territorial considerations, and that relates to what are we promoting, what value chains are we promoting, what enterprises are we promoting, and who is benefiting. This is absolutely critical. The issue of institutional actors and agency. These are the support institutions within production, within the market system development, and even within trade. How do we have these institutions structured to support the majority, to support our small-scale farmers who are the majority? Then a very important factor is the multi-level governance. This is a very important aspect within this understanding, where we look at actions that are taken at different levels, which affect production. They affect the next set of processes within the value chain, processing, consumption, marketing, up to trade. And all these have a huge bearing on every common person. Now, to do this, we need to move beyond long-term planning and look at, we need to move beyond the short-term planning to long-term planning. And that means also looking at what tools do we use to give us meaningful analysis, to make us have quality-informed decision-making and quality actions as a result. Moving beyond the neoclassical models and looking at more comprehensive models of looking at what we have in terms of data, in terms of the insights that can inform what improvements to take. And then very quickly, I just want to give some highlights of the things I see that are important to help us improve our food systems, and especially then dealing with the issues of political orientations, which it's not very easy because there are issues of power and relationships, and there's no straitjacket way of addressing those issues. But I believe what I want to propose, which is very much in line with what some of the speakers have proposed, could go a long way in helping this, address these imbalances within our food system. One, business as usual is not an option for our Kenyan food system. That means we have to avoid the issue of favoring certain enterprises, certain crops, as opposed to the others. I think recently I had an opportunity on television, and I said earlier on our research institutions used to focus a lot on what we call orphaned crops. But indeed, those are the crops that have become opportunity crops for us. Can we do much more work in that area? And how do we do this, therefore? We need to increase our investments in the generation and provision of technical knowledge, in the farming systems that we have, being able to control pests and diseases, enhance soil fertility management with increased carbon sequestration, and also management of different crops and livestock. This will go a long way in contributing to making it possible for us to have nutrition-sensitive value chains that will be best integrated into our farming systems, into our food system, sorry. Two, we need to have strong knowledge management and application driven by science, technology, and innovations. And I'm glad to see, Egerton, you are certainly a world-class institution that is really taking a lead in this within this country. You are an equal player to other institutions. And very importantly for us, we need to embrace political economy incentive structure and work for it, fight for it, that promotes diversification in farm enterprises so that we stop the biases on zero-based enterprises and look at other enterprises that can help enrich our food systems, and taking the aspect of long-term planning to sustainable production and consumption of various value chains. This is one way of helping to address the issue of food system bias that is usually associated with focus on monocrops, and yet we know for a balanced, stable, and resilient food system, we need to have enterprises that go beyond the staples, that go beyond maize, rice, and so on, and that go beyond export-oriented interests like horticulture, floriculture. Those can be of good to the economy, yes, but when you look at the question of social justice, looking at do we have sufficient food on the table for everyone, issues of social justice and food security, then we need to handle this kind of food biases. And this is my last slide. We need to look at the institutional improvements within the market systems, looking at issues of trust and traceability systems, just being concerned about where do you get the food you see on the shelves of our supermarkets, within our local markets. Where is it coming from? Who is producing that? These are things that we need to look at. Issue of food safety. We are also aware how in some urban areas, people are actually consuming vegetables that have been grown in conditions that are not healthy for our livelihoods. And these are issues that needs to be considered through regulations, increased consumer awareness, education, and others. A very important point we need to consider is also looking at the synergies and trade-offs across various farming systems and value chains. This will be important, and especially if we employ more comprehensive tools of collecting data around these enterprises, doing meaningful analysis, and then interpreting this through the lens of political economy approach, asking the questions, who is controlling the processes? Who is benefiting from that? And where are the challenges? And second, lastly, we have to promote multi-stakeholder national forums. And Egerton, my former university, I want to say you are doing great to have such a forum like this one. We need to see more of those, and at country level, to ensure that we have integrated, participatory, and rights-based approaches to governance and policy making. This is one way we can look into some of the structural differences, inequalities, and power imbalances that are ingrained in our food systems. And to do that, we'll find we are able to get agricultural support policies. We are able to agitate for more investments in this sector. We don't want to be saying all the time, agriculture is the backbone of our economy, yet it is given a lip service in terms of serious investment that are needed to do this. And we need to do that by looking at interests that are not just driven by a few people, but interests driven by science, what works by practice, our own indigenous knowledge within our farmers, within our livestock keeper is very critical. Ethics, what we want to see as right, as just in society, and this to be done within the broader public interest. And finally, the issue of looking at the institutional and the policy environment is absolutely key. We can only have a policy or a set of policies or strategies considered to be worthwhile if they are translated into specific national programs and actions for the betterment of our food systems. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and look forward to interacting with you in this session.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mulama, for that stimulating and informative presentation. You have really told us that at the end of this presentation, we should be able to answer the 3 questions you have raised. We need to know who controls our food systems and who benefits from the current organization of our food systems, and what are the obstacles to change. Our viewers, I'm encouraging you to, if you have some questions for Dr. Mulama Amdavi, please post them at our Q&A. He will respond to them. So far, we have come to the end of the first session, where we have been given the 2 presentations. Now we are entering another short session of Q&A, and I have 3 questions or 2 for the first presenter. that is Professor. Yes, Professor Adika, you have two questions. One is from Geoffrey Odhiambo. He is saying, in highlighting pathways of food system, you have mentioned only women empowerment, in bracket, in the gender context. Why have you left other gender? The other question is from Professor Ogweno Joshua. Food quality is a major issue in developing countries, including Kenya. How comes that we export in Kenya in terms of vegetables and fruits that are superior, that is, they are high in quality, and yet we consume, what we consume is of low quality? What can we do to avoid the double standards? Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Prof. I'll answer the first question. The second question is network was a little bit, you got stuck somewhere, but it's on issue on quality. Now, I want to tie the question on pathways, and I was I emphasized women, and I want to tie this to the question my colleague has just raised in his presentation about who controls food system. And I will wish the listener to answer this question. And to me, I will say it's my mother. When I was growing, is the one who controlling what we eat in the house. And therefore, the question is who controls the food system? It is the consumer. It is you. It is you and me on the plate. But the question is, do we know that we are controlling the food system? And therefore, this goes back to the gender issue. If we empower women, then you are diversifying the food system, and you are actually strengthening the food system. This doesn't mean that the other gender does not have a role to play. But in most cases, you look at the other gender, we just come back home and eat what you have been presented without questioning where it has come from and how it has been obtained. Giving money to get food is not really not enough. But the question of choosing what to be consumed is very, very important. And that's why women play a very, very, very big role when it comes to food system issues. I will wish you repeat the other question on quality. I didn't get it very clearly. You got stuck somewhere.
Okay, Professor, I will repeat it again.
Yes.
Professor Ogweno wants to know why in developing countries, food quality is a major issue, that is including Kenya, and how come that we export items or fruits of superior quality as opposed to what we consume locally? What can we do to avoid the double standards? That was the question.
Thank you for that question. This will go back to standards. And I want to borrow from the previous presenter. He has talked about traceability. And I think in the developed world, they are very particular on minimum residual levels, and they're very particular on standards. Therefore, what goes on the market must achieve minimum standards before it's acceptable. But in our case, in sub-Saharan Africa, first of all, do we have anything available for us to eat? You can answer that question for yourself. Therefore, that means that whatever is left, whatever is available is what we eat. But as a country, as a nation, as a continent, we have the ability to develop standards, minimum standards that our food must achieve. And for us to do this, it all goes back to all the stakeholders. It goes back to the policy. And more importantly to me, in the food security sector, it goes back to the consumer. If myself I'm able to dictate the kind of food I want to from the market, then I know the system will have no choice other than to provide what I need. Currently, most of the food being provided to the market is based on what consumers want. And that because we are the people who are dictating the demand side of the value chain. And therefore, the system is just responding to the demand. And therefore, if we demand a certain quality, then we should be able to maintain standards. But the question is, do we have the ability to demand those standards? And therefore, there's still a lot more that we need to do to strengthen the ability of the consumer to demand a high quality product. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I will now invite Dr. David Mulama. Dr. David Mulama, if you have something to comment on that second question, you are welcome. That has already been answered by Professor Andika, but there is a comment also for you from Professor Nancy. Nancy says, thank you for your presentation. You have noted the low funding in agriculture. Kindly comment on how to increase return on investment. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want just to quickly add something to the food quality issue, which my colleague has just responded to. One of the key factors limiting our equitable attention to food safety in terms of what we are producing to consume locally and in terms of what we are producing to export is to do with, one, what are we producing that for? If we are producing largely for income, which is the case for the exports that are made for flowers, fresh vegetables and fruits, again, those are done under very severe and agreed regulations and standards. So those who are engaged in that business must be certified. So they meet the requirements for export. And this is something I've been actually saying, and I want to say it here today again. It's important for our producers, and especially our small-scale farmers, and those who are even able to produce more for markets, to also appreciate the need to link consumption to their own health. There's no point for a mama to work so hard, get good income, and go to buy medicine. Why can that mama also know that really by consuming that balanced diet of the diverse food crops and products produced on his or her farm would actually help the farmer or the family member to have a better health and be more resilient to attacks from infections. So here, the question of increasing consumer education, for me, it is very key. And if Egerton can also pick this as a program so that we are able to increase consumer education within urban areas, within rural areas, that people really see how to link production to consumption and to health. The nexus around these three components are very key, and they are lost within most of our people who produce a bit for sale and some for consumption. Now, back to the question on research and investment, and what someone asked also what the agriculture extension officers are doing. Now, why I gave the examples earlier of investments in industrial agriculture by different partners, donors, corporate organizations, it is because they have a specific interest, they have specific agenda, which this agenda can be perpetuated, can be supported by our government, by our institutions, research institutions and a few development institutions. But then you'll find the research is geared, as I said earlier, towards certain specific, even staples. And if we focus on staples alone, we will never address adequately the issue of a comprehensive and balanced food system. We will never. Now, the question of what our extension people are doing about this, again, I want to suggest from this forum, there are certain insights I see coming out. Some of the recommendations we are making, these need to be picked up into the review of our training programs. For example, agriculture extension. I'm a product of agriculture extension, education and extension. Really, I see the need for this program to undergo some review. There are issues I can feel, and some of us, we are now stakeholders, we can come back in and give some suggestions on how do we review our extension programs to really be able to respond to the challenges we are facing in the contemporary society we have today. The way our extension officers were being trained and expected to work 10 years, 20 years ago, friends, it can't be the same today. So I would want to suggest, and Agriculture Education and Extension Department, if you are listening to me, If you want to review this program to be an example for the rest of the other programs that have outreach components, we really need to review this program. And there are very innovative methods that are also now being applied, being used, which I know they really need to be integrated into the curriculum. Some specific areas that need to be touched, like this issue of consumer education. How do we do it? Not only to the mama, to the Wanjiku, Mama Mboga, but also even to that top policymaker, so that the language we speak about what kind of food are we getting to the table, it's a language that is understood by Mama Mboga as well as that top guy who is actually seeing our safety and our peace in this country. That is the kind of debate we need to encourage, we need to infuse, and also to integrate within our institutions. Thank you.
So thank you, Daktari, for the answers you have given. They are quite convincing. The rest of questions and answers, please, if you have any questions for the two presenters, continue posting them and you will get the answers through the same post. I think we have come to the end of the first session, and allow me to go to the next session, which will be moderated by Professor Alexander Kahi. That is panel discussion. Professor Kahi, you are most welcome to take the next session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mrimba. I don't know whether you can hear me well.
Can hear you very well, Professor. Proceed.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Let me first take this opportunity to introduce myself. You've heard that I'll be moderating the next session, which is a panel discussion. I'm Alexander Kahi, and I'm a professor of animal breeding and genomics. And I'm also the immediate former Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of academic affairs at Egerton University. And let me take this opportunity to welcome all of us to this very important session. When I look at the program, this is the last session of this conference, and I will really try my best to make it as enjoyable as possible so that we can all of us contribute to what is ahead of us. Kindly join me in thanking the previous speakers. We heard a lot about the food systems from Professor Darius Andika, and also we had a lot on politics from Dr. David Mulama Amudavi. And they've really shared very important insights on the food systems and also on the factors affecting their development. And as we head into this panel discussion, I'm really excited, very excited to listen to the important submission of our panelists and also to welcome all of us to partake in the deliberation that will arise. I'm informed that all our panelists are in the house. The three are in the house. Dr. Oliver K. Kirui is in the house. Lucy Mchoki and Professor Michael Hauser is in the house. But we expect Professor James to log in at around 10:30 in the next 30 minutes. No, not 30 minutes. I think in the next 10 minutes. So I really take great pride in moderating this panel discussion and welcoming our panelists to share their resourceful insights on the key threats and challenges to food systems in Kenya and possible interventions. And I promise you that we expect to have a very lively discussion today. As you can see, our panelists are individuals who not only have the resourceful knowledge on food systems and also on entrepreneurship for sustainable development, but also have passion for this cause. And we should expect a very insightful session that will position us to instigate reforms in the agri-food ecosystem basing on the outputs of this session. Before introducing our panelists, I would like to say something as far as the food system in Africa is concerned. I think we are all aware that food systems in Africa have been adversely affected by the compounded impacts of climate-induced shocks. Then we have conflicts all over Africa. And then most recently, there is the COVID-19. And I will refer to these risks as the triple risks, which have really resulted in unprecedented social economic impacts, I would say, and really eroded the resilience of the large segments of the population in Africa. And this is especially the poor and the marginalized groups, and are really threatening to wipe out the gains made towards achieving food and nutrition security in Africa. The triple risks, as you can see, they are simply interlinked as a nexus, and they present complex challenges. As we are all aware, climate change is a critical driver of resource-based conflicts. And then there is the COVID-19 pandemic that has further, I would say, aggravated this conflict situation through increased competition for water. There is now increased competition for pasture, and also increased competition for land, all of which are essential assets, as we are aware, in promoting the food systems. Then we have volatile security situations. I think for those who watched TV yesterday, you might have noted that we had some conflict somewhere in Samburu, where some, I think, herdsmen were killed. So this volatile security situation and the coronavirus pandemic, they threaten the food systems and the rural livelihoods. I really don't want to take a lot of your time, but I'd like to take this opportunity just to introduce our panelists. And the way I will do it, I will introduce all of them at the same time and then proceed to the next section. So if the screen is ready for Dr. Oliver K. Kirui, the bio for Dr. Kirui. So if it is not, then I can just continue that we expect 4, yeah, okay. So Dr. Kirui is one of our panelists and is a senior researcher and a postdoc fellow at the Center for Development Research at the University of Bonn in Germany, and he holds a PhD in development economics from the Center for Development Research in the same university. And his research interests revolve around sustainable development, and is currently carrying out research that would contribute to sustainable agricultural growth and food and nutrition security in developing countries. Can we welcome Dr. Oliver K. Kirui? The next panelist is Lucy Muchoki. Lucy Muchoki. She is the CEO of the Pan-African Agribusiness and Agro-Industry Consortium. Is the bio ready? She's the CEO of the Pan-African Agribusiness and Agro-Industry Consortium and holds a master's degree in strategy and business management, and currently a member of the United Food System Champion Group, and also a member of the African Agribusiness Task Force. And she's serving in various advisory councils and boards for various agribusiness, I think, leadership systems. So can we welcome Lucy Muchoki? And then our next panelist is Professor Michael Hoiser, and he is the principal scientist with the International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, that is ICRISAT. Based in Nairobi, he oversees research on agricultural transformation, and is also an associate professor at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna. And his current work focuses on food system designs to improve climate security. So let us all welcome Professor Michael Hoiser. The next panelist is Professor James Tutoek. He's a commissioner with the National Land Commission. And I'm happy to inform the audience that Professor Tutoek is our former Vice Chancellor of Egerton University. And he holds a PhD in animal nutrition from the University of Guelph, Canada. And is a research specialist with interest in animal science. So let us all welcome Professor James Tutoek. So as you've seen from the brief bio, our panelists, they represent, there's a university, and then we have the private sector, there is the International Research Organization, and there is a government body. And this, I would refer to it as a typical, someone yesterday mentioned, triple helix platform. So once you hear their views, you'll be able to appreciate the key threats and challenges to food systems in Kenya and the possible interventions. So let me take this opportunity to thank them for contributing their time. Time is always money. And also to thank them for contributing their efforts to make this panel discussion possible. And the way this discussion will be organized is such that I will ask the first question, which I expect them to respond through the presentations that they've prepared. And then after that, we will all have around 25 minutes Q&A period after their presentation. And what I'd like to recommend to our audience is that please type your questions. We have our Q&A. Type your questions and also be brief as possible so that we can get to everyone's question. And please reflect on what you hear, put it down in the chat section, and then we'll have an opportunity to engage with the panelists later. So I have the first question, which is a general question, and I expect the panelists to respond to this question through the presentations that they've prepared for us. And for each, I will give them 20 minutes because for this session, we have around an hour. So I'll give them around 20 minutes to respond to that question. And then thereafter, we'll simply proceed to some other questions. And the way it will be, I want this to be panel discussion. So I expect us sometimes to be responding to the same questions as members of this panel. And then at the end of it all, then I will give an opportunity to the audience to ask questions to specific presenters. So the first question that I'd like to ask, and I expect the panelists to respond to this question through their respective presentation, is what from your own opinion are the key threats and challenges to food systems in Kenya, and what are the roles of your institutions in ensuring sustainable agri-food systems? Because we have panelists from there's the university, there is the private sector, international research organization, and the government body. So what are the roles of these institutions in ensuring sustainable agri-food systems? So Dr. Oliver K. Kirui.
Thank you so much, Professor Alexander.
The floor is yours, Dr. Oliver K. Kirui.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Kirui.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to say thank you so much, Professor, for that very kind introduction and also setting the, I would say, the pace for this session. I wanted to, yeah. Are you able to see my screen as well?
Dr. Kirui?
Your screens, your slides are clear. We can see the first slide, Dr. Kirui.
Okay, and okay, my microphone okay? Can I go ahead now? Is that okay?
Go ahead, everything is okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Prof. So, yes, and I'm really very grateful for the opportunity to share my opinions and insights and my reflection on this very important topic of food systems transformation. And I would be focused more on talking about really funding for research and development. And in this case, my intention is to give a little bit into some investment and policy priorities that Kenya and other African countries and then perhaps developing countries, low-income countries could focus on to really address the big question that you just asked: what could be the threats and what could be the challenges for food systems? So, as an overview, I would just give quickly the importance of what agricultural research and development can do for agricultural productivity and agricultural transformation. But more importantly, I think it's important to look at the state of funding or the state of agricultural R&D in Africa, and particularly in Kenya, which then will answer your question specifically: what could be the threats or what could be the challenges? And related to that is how is the finances for agricultural R&D investments spent? So the expenditure really. And then, of course, I don't want to dwell on the problems only, but also suggest perhaps what could be the best entry points and policy priorities going to the future. This debate that we have today on food systems is not only happening around Kenya, but there's a global engagement going on now for 2021 UN Food Systems Summit. I've been actively involved in participating in this because our institute and our professor is chairing the scientific group of this UN Food Systems Summit. And there are really 5 key areas. And the previous researchers, previous presenters have already given some insights into some of these things. And the 5 areas that are very key for the UN Food Systems Summit, and which I think also is important for our discussions today, is really the question of access to safe and nutritious food, not just safe food, but also nutritious food, and then sustainable consumption patterns. So when the keynote today was asking, what are you eating? Do you know where it's coming from? And then did you finish what you were served, and so forth? So sustainable consumption patterns. And there is a debate going on: is meat important? Should we shift more to vegetarian diets and so forth? So I'm not going into those debates today, but there is a lot of debate going on these topics now. And then the nature positive production. This is more really looking into the climate options. Are we producing and careful for the future generations as well, or are we producing for ourselves only? And then equitable livelihood. So there is a question today. The debate is that we produce enough food, but the challenge is distribution. So there is enough food to feed everyone today, but there are people who go to bed angry today because they cannot get access to food. So there's questions of equity. And finally, the big topic in the UN Food Systems Summit, the action track number 5, is on resilience and vulnerabilities and really on shocks and stress. So I left a link there where we can all discuss that. But 10 days ago, a week ago, we had a very important summit, an important pre-summit meeting, and this was on Science Days, where we talk really with scientists, we are talking with practitioners and people that are really involved in the scientific aspects of food systems. And we had 7 key areas. And I've also left a link. You can really see the recordings there. You can see the discussions from international scientists. Over 2,000 people attended the meetings, and it was a great success. There were topics on, of course, looking at STI, science, technology, innovations for food system transformation. There were questions on what science could do to achieve more healthy diets, inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems. And then more important, maybe number 6 is where links to what we have been discussing yesterday and today, empowering and engaging key players in food system innovation. I got the privilege to chair the session on the youth, where we had over 200 youth attending from across the globe, discussing also really how to incentivize them to participate in food system transformation. So, and it was very, very interesting. So I don't want to go into those discussions and really, but the link there for the program and the attendance, as well as also the outcome of that discussion, would be available in the links that I left there. So to my very important contribution to this summit is really to discuss why invest in agriculture R&D. There is evidence, there is documented evidence, there is irrefutable evidence that investment in agricultural research and development is a key important driver to agricultural productivity growth. That is undisputed. Every dollar invested or every shilling invested today in R&D is expected to give an average return of three shillings or $3, $1 for $3. And actually it can go as high as $15 in some instances, or even more. But the impact of expenditure on agricultural R&D is also shown to be higher compared with expenditure on other modern agricultural inputs. But again, we grew the benefits of R&D over a long period of time, sometimes up to 10 years. So there is need to sustain investment, because what is invested today you may not be able to achieve or see the outcome in the coming year or the coming 5 years. So sustainable investment means that in the 10 years, we begin reaping what we invested already a decade ago. African governments have recognized the critical role played by agricultural R&D. That's why the CADEP processes, which is part of the African Union NEPAT negotiations, actually say that the agreement was that R&D must get at least 1% of agricultural GDP. The other important recommendation is from the Science Agenda for Agriculture in Africa, the S3A, adopted by also the head of states in 2014, where there was a discussion and really development of a continental or continent-wide implementation plan of this. But also beyond Africa, the Global Forum for Agricultural Research recommends that low-income countries should at least invest 1 to 1.5% of agricultural GDP in agricultural research. But if you look at the reality today, the actual R&D investment by central government and local government in some countries, the federal government and the local governments, is way too low, and it cannot be able to impact on agricultural productivity or even generate any transformation at all. So if you look at the state, between 2000 and 2011, World Bank documentation of 2016 actually shows that many countries experience almost a near zero or negative growth in agricultural R&D spending. And the intensity has also been declining over the last 7-8 years, so since 2014. One of this important study, flagship study, showed that only 6 of the 36 sub-Saharan African countries were able to invest at least 1%. So the other 30 countries were not able to invested below the recommended CADEP or NEPAT's target. But if you look again, there's huge variation in spending in these countries. But if you look at, for example, this is in 2017. If you look at Africa-wide, the agricultural expenditure is part of total, is a percentage of total expenditure. Most countries are actually spending between 2.5% and 2.5%, or even less than 2.5%. And this is not even agricultural GDP, this is total spending. And if you look at the trend on your right, in Kenya, the agricultural expenditure over 1980 to 2020 and 20 to 2017, where the data was available, and this is in constant, in percentage of total expenditure, you will see that actually the 80s were much better in terms of what we spend, or what we highlighted or we set aside for the agricultural sectors. But it has been declining over and over again. There is a slight rise in 2010, 2011, 2012, but again, it went down, and today we are roughly below 5%. And I think the right figure for 2017 was about 2018 was about 4.8%. And I think the previous keynote also highlighted on that. If you look in terms of actual value, in terms of how much, in terms of money, we are spending roughly about $400 million US dollars in the agricultural sector, which is really low for Kenya. And countries across Africa also is just roughly between these figures, 400 million to less than $100 million in a year. But more importantly, again, if you look at most available finances, where do they go? Most of that finances actually are consumed by salaries and the operating cost for the program. So 54%, more than half of the money that goes to agricultural sector is into staff salaries. And another 30% also goes into operations and programs. So really little is left for capital improvement and really development of key issues, and that is only 17%. So when dealing with budget constraint, what happens with most national agricultural research centers and sectors in Africa, they often cut on non-wage operating expenditure. So lab cost and equipment, spare parts, training, maintenance are the ones that suffer most, not of course salaries and other things. So R&D investments also have really associated capacity challenges. So many African countries today have insufficiently trained and experienced staff with relevant, say for example, postgraduate qualifications. Previous speakers have mentioned something on these capacity issues. The faculties of agriculture and agricultural research organizations are in short supply of, say, master's and doctoral level scientists as well. And then student enrollment in universities has really grown. You saw, for example, Kenya, many students are now joining universities. But if you go, how many of them are enrolling in postgraduate programs in agriculture? It's quite minimal, it's very low, and no one is motivated to go into this. There are very few students who would say, I want to be an agriculturalist. Most of them would want to do engineering or medicine or other things because they see that the aspirations or potential in agriculture to really be very, very poor. So I have suggested maybe 3 key areas, or perhaps 4 key areas going forward. What could we do to prioritize R&D? First of all, we need to invest on food and agricultural R&D as an important tool for broad-based innovation. It is not just to deal with the current problems, but rather to think and really look beyond the current challenges and look at food systems. What kind of food systems are we envisioning in the coming decades? And how do we go there? So R&D investment should follow that kind of broad-based innovation thinking. So in this case, we need stronger linkages with international agricultural and food science partnerships. So richer countries, emerging economies could really make important contribution by working together. But also we need to introduce innovative funding modalities and coordination and prioritization of relevant work among research agencies. No need for duplication, no need for doing what perhaps other sectors could do or other sections and other companies could do. So perhaps it's good in the face of scarce funding, prioritizing where to put money in terms of R&D is important, is key. But more importantly, it is also good to amplify the benefits of agricultural R&D by improving the linkages with research, between research, the producers, the private sector, the farmer organizations, the NGOs, and civil society actors. If you go today to what is happening in R&D institute or research and development institution, there will be some form of poor linkages with 1 or 2 or many of these actors I'm talking about. The private sector, like for example, here in Germany, where I'm based, takes a very key role in R&D. They put their money there, they put their researchers there, they pay for researchers to operate. Farmers and through farmer organizations finance R&D as well. They make contributions to that. So because they know the benefits of R&D goes beyond the institute, they want to benefit from that. And finally, I guess it's important to improve the linkages between research and extension providers. The last presenter talked about how the extension services in Kenya and Africa look like today. It is not what the 21st century form of extension services would be. I mean, if you go to extension agencies in different countries, in developed countries, there are people that can operate drones, there are people that can monitor pests, there are people that can fight, for example, pest infestations. The locust that is happening in Africa could be the work of extension agents, and they could be the ones developing because they are working in the fields. They could be the ones developing prototypes of how do we deal with these challenges. But as it is today, we have capacity challenges, we have funding challenges for the extension services, and there is very poor linkage with what is the newest research output from R&D or from, say, for example, national agricultural research centers between and the extension agents. With that, I want to stop there and say thank you, Chair, and I'm open to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Oliver Kirui, and thanks for your excellent response to the question and also for keeping time. So members, continue posting your questions in the Q&A part. So we move to the next panelist, Lucy Mchoki. Lucy Mchoki, can you please share your thoughts on the question?
Thank you, and good morning. All protocols observed.
Morning.
Sorry, I don't have a presentation. I thought this was going to be a panel discussion, but I see there's a different way also of doing a panel discussion. And I'm very happy to reconnect with Egerton University, an institution that I've worked with before, and worked on a particular project which is very up to date, which is very important to me. And I've never forgotten working with the students, ensuring that we had a practical way of getting them to the field. And we did this under a program we call PANAC Internship Student Program. And we worked closely with FARA. That FARA means Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa. It was a program which was designed to ensure that universities are working closely with the businesses in a practical way, and there was innovation, embracement of innovation through research and development. So indeed, we worked with Bayer, we worked with Equity, we worked with Amiran, and I had more than 60 students from the university, and were able to really have very interactive way of working and ensuring that the students were not just sitting in their offices where they're left doing nothing. Indeed, this was something that up to date, whenever I see those students, some of them now are working at the Bayer at very senior positions. And I had a chat with the Bayer MD last week, and we really thought that's something we should have continued doing. I also have had a chance to work with the university through a collaboration and an exchange program between Harvard University, Strathmore, and of course, Egerton. And this was another area that I found very interesting. Getting the students, these were the master students, these were not the internship, these were master students, and they were able to deep dive and get practical investment opportunities and challenges around 6 value chains within 6 counties. Up to date, I've noted a number of companies which have used this research to develop their companies. Companies like Bidco, the potato value chain, the juice, and a number of them. This was also a very interesting way of how do you bring the university, how do you bring the business people to work together and get solutions and what we call sustainable and well-structured innovative solutions that we can be able to sit down and every time of the day, remember that they are practical. They're not just research in the classroom. So indeed, today I had been asked to address the issue on the food safety, but yes, the issue that we would like to talk about more as from the private sector is the overall business climate around the food system. And I'm very glad that as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm one of the food system champion, and I'm a member of the private sector guiding group. So what we are doing here is addressing what are the issues around the business in relation to the food system. But when I look at one of a very key point is that we are working around the action tracks, and the first action track addresses the issue of food safety and nutrition. The first action track under the UN Food System Summit, which we are moving next week into Rome for the pre-summit, is number 1, ensure access to safe and nutritious food for all. This indeed takes us back. We know that in Africa, we are still food insecure. A very important component, a very important and very pertinent issue that we still need to really address, that many years after independence, we still can't feed ourselves. However, the issue of food safety is still very, very, very key. The fact that we are having so many people, so many deaths related to food safety. And indeed, the food safety is still an area that we can be able, as private sector people, look at how we create businesses using the food safety. What are the investment opportunities for the private sector in ensuring a food safe country and food safe society? When I look at Kenya today, we still lack a defined and published policy on food safety. As part of a wider national food and nutrition policy, there exist food laws designed to protect the consumers. Food safety controls agencies operate under the Ministry of Trade, Industrialization, Public Health and Sanitation, Livestock, Fisheries, and still today, we are still addressing how do we come up with this food safety policy. And I'm glad that we are currently we are working on this policy jointly with the private sector participation, and we hope in the next few months we'll have a very good policy on the food safety that will guide the whole Kenya approach toward the food safety. When I think what are the key issues that we as a country need to look at in terms of how this food safety is affecting our food system, first you have to remember good health is very important to all of us. So if we don't have a healthy nation, a healthy people, then obviously we are lacking in so many ways. We are lacking in terms of reduced country workforce. We are lacking in terms of market access, reduced income. We are also having a big problem in terms of addressing the whole country health system. We have seen quite a lot of investment being taken to the ministry to address these diseases related to food safety. Whereas we can save that money and take it to more investment and take more jobs. When I think of what needs to be done, a lot has been discussed. And I know that there's so much going on. But I want to remember that food safety does not just start after you have sold the food. It starts from the production. What kind of inputs are we embracing? How safe is our seeds and the fertilizers that we are using? This is not rocket science that a number of practices associated with the production have led to a lot of very unsafe food that we are consuming. However, I have seen very good innovations and research undertaken in the past. And I'll quote one of us, Charity, Dr. Charity, who worked with the collaboration of Carol and Kenya Agricultural Research, and they were able to come up with Alpha Safe that you use when you are going to plant, so that you ensure that from the production, from the time you plant, that your food is safe. However, we still need to continue doing more research in this. And just like my previous panelists mentioned, we need to continue investing in research and development. This is key. I want to address the issue of the storage. We have noted that a number of aflatoxins are normally not just during the production, but the kind of storage. Where do we store our food? I want to stress here how important it is to continue coming with innovative way and investing in the production, in the storage of our food. We have known that in the past, our grandparents, which today we say that they were ignorant, but a few things that they did, which we have been saying currently or recently, we thought they were outdated, but now we realize that they understood what they were doing. How to keep your products or your raw materials or your commodities dry and safe, and ensure that they're not contaminated. So these are areas we need to address. We need to look at the old ways of doing things and still understand, and we are hoping that our research will address these issues. What happened in the past in terms of moving forward, those traditional methodologies, can we still use them? When I look at other things like capacity, this is another area that we need to address. There are very few farmers at times, there are very few sensitization. And someone talked about our own research, at the same time, our own way of reaching out to the farmer through extension services has been very weak, especially with the introduction of the devolved system. This is an area we need again to invest on. How do we ensure that if the government is not supporting our own extension service, how do we ensure that the private sector invests in the extension service so that our farmers can be supported through capacity development on this particular area, so that when they are involved in production, they need to remember how important it is. What they plant is what we shall all eat. So they are not left alone, insecure. It is everybody else who will suffer from this. At the same time, our own SMEs, and I want to talk about SMEs because these are part of us as a business community. More than 80% of the food is distributed by SMEs, and a lot of contamination happens around the SMEs during the distribution. So there's a need to reemphasize, and there's a need to build the capacity of our SMEs so that they can remember that what they distribute, the channels of distribution, and how they handle the food in the end of the day affects everybody, including themselves. So and then I look at affordability and the methods. We need to understand how can we ensure that our universities continue working with the private sector to come up with these affordable methods and affordable storage, so that we can all be able to afford and ensure that there's more participation in the food storage. Notably, Kenya currently, we have just, we passed last year the bill on the warehousing receipt. So it's going to be more privatized, and there's more need to ensure that the private sector are working together with the research in developing more methods of drying foods and storage, even in our warehousing receipt. Notably, we need to ensure that there's affordable green energy that can be distributed around the communities, around our youth, so that they can all participate in this very important agenda of ensuring that we store food and the food is safe and it is well distributed and well handled. With that, I thank you, Chair, and I look forward to continued engagement. Asante sana.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucy Mshoki, for your great insights. We move to the next presenter, Professor Hoysa Michael. Can you share your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kahi, Mr. Chair. Let me start off by saying thank you to this invitation. It's always a pleasure to speak among Roof Forum scholars, and it's great partnership with the MasterCard Foundation. And I'm also particularly thankful to Egerton University, a university I owe part of my master degrees, or master degree that is 25 years old. Yeah. Now, David Amodavi has set the stage and underpinning, the philosophical underpinning of what I would like to contribute to this conversation, because he spoke about the political economy of the food system. And to answer your question, Mr. Chair, in in one sentence, kind of what is the biggest threat to the food system, not only in Kenya, but generally, then my simple response is its design, the way we design it. Because the food system is as good as its design. So if we want to make it better, we have to improve the design. And this requires political will, and this would require us to tackle the political economy that keeps us, asking the same question all over again, kind of what can we contribute to improve the food system? I would like to turn this question around and ask, how can we do business differently to use what we already know about how to improve the food system? Now, I would like to drill down to climate security as a main topic and ask what impact does climate variability have on sustainable food system, particularly in the arid and semi-arid areas. That's an area where EGRISAT works. And as a volunteer and a warning, I'll not address the topic comprehensively. It's impossible. But I'll open a window into our work that I'm happy to open up for discussion as well. The impact on food systems, and we've heard that from the previous speakers, and it was on the agenda yesterday, implies a couple of risks, and there are production risks, there are issues around food circulation risks. We've just spoken about mycotoxins. They're all linked to climate, directly and indirectly. But equally important, and Professor Kai, you introduced the topic in your introduction, are conflicts and conflicts over resources that are an issue, not only in Kenya, but we have an office in Nigeria, and Nigeria is known for its conflicts between pastoralists and farmers. We have it across the Sahel, we have it across the Horn of Africa. So conflicts over resources are partially linked to climate and climate variability, but as you will see in a second, not only. Now, I'm calling in from Isiolo, and we've just come southwards from Samburu, and we're putting together a climate security initiative together with 7 counties to better understand what we can do differently in future on climate security in agro-pastoral areas, particularly to go beyond the usual production function that we assign to agriculture. Agriculture and natural resource use is multifunctional, and that's something we sometimes overlook, which also is understandable. But let me look at conflicts and put livestock into the center of this picture, because we often see livestock as the root cause of all our problems. I keep saying, well, the livestock, they eat our crops that we have invested so much into. But it's understandable, because when livestock and its owners are confronted with climate insecurities, they sometimes opt for extreme strategies to the extent they would run over into everything that's green in a field. And what applies to Samburu and other parts of Kenya, as I said earlier, goes through the entire Horn of Africa and the Sahel. The number of conflict events has risen over the past 20 years. This is data I put together from ACLED, the ACLED's conflict database, in an attempt to understand the number of conflict events that have increased or have risen and the fatalities that it's caused. So you can see clearly a trend all over Africa. Now, I'm not saying all these casualties are linked to climate. There are issues around social identity, historical grievances, human security. Sometimes it's organized crime that sneaks into the picture. There's a political ecology, and I'm repeating David's sentiment around political economy that we have to understand. But there's also resource scarcity as a major issue. And that's where we come in as EGRISAT and partners, being fully aware how big the picture really is, but making a contribution around the resource scarcity issue. Our working hypothesis is that if we could get out the burnable, inflammable wood, the fire may not spark. In other words, if we can increase feed intensity, kind of livestock forages and feed in various forms. There's no time to go into all these different options. Then in this conversation now, but then we would pull out the inflammable wood to some extent. But of course, we'll have to look at all the other issues too. Now, what are we doing as ECRISAT? Just a few hints. Well, ECRISAT's been known for improving crops, and someone said orphan crops on this call. Well, crops that aren't the big five. That's what we do as ECRISAT, and sorghum and millets that do particularly well in the drylands is a core business of the institute. We look at seed systems and work with CALO in Kenya, but the National Agricultural Research System in other countries to bring and connect what we do as breeders to farmers. But there's one issue, and that is often the attractiveness of the products and the price. The price of millet compared to maize in Nairobi is not competitive for people with little income. So that nutrition transition that we need requires more than just growing the right crops or getting the products right. We would have to, and that's one answer to what I've just posed, we would have to integrate the crops into farm and landscapes. And then there's a third thrust that I'm going to talk about. But let's say the second one. The crop doesn't work in isolation. The crop is part of a complex agro-ecosystem. That means we have to get the linkages, the back and forward linkages of that crop right, through soil and water conservation, flat flood management, particularly in the arid and semi-arid tropics of that region. In other words, an improved millet variety doesn't help us if we haven't got the farming system right, and if we haven't looked after soil and water and land degradation, and making the crop as part of the solution towards rehabilitation. The third trust, and here's an example of our watershed work in India, integrated watershed management. We're doing similar work in Tanzania. There are quite famous examples that we've developed with chia set in Ethiopia as well. And they all show a similar trend. If we get the right people in partnership to work with the technologies that we already have in place, we can rehabilitate landscapes and green fields. We can increase the gross income and the total income per year. And that's critically important for farmers and also agro-pastoralists and eventually pastoralists. Why should they invest in something that doesn't pay off? Paying for environmental services from the farmer's perspective doesn't make sense. But if an environmental service is connected to food production, it does. But again, this requires to change our political economy around food and feed value chains, and it requires to redesign our food system. And this is an important footnote I would like to mention here. The UNFSS will only succeed if it really starts discussing food system design and defining measures to redesign the system to get what we actually all want in terms of outcomes and impact. But let's move to the third thrust: product development, value chain, and business incubation. Lucy, you've spoken about that already. I just therefore want to highlight one thing. I think we would have to move from a supply-driven philosophy where we put production into the driver's seat and assume all the rest will fall in place along the value chain, to a demand-pull approach. So demand-led interventions that work with consumers to create the demand for healthy products, for healthy and sustainable diets, but also for livestock feeds, is pertinent. And if we don't get that transition right, to move from push to pull, I think we will not move as fast in the agricultural transformation as we would like to see. But that requires a whole new approach to consumer awareness raising and actually transition support to those who can't afford healthy diets. In our work, we discuss a lot and brainstorm and develop a lot around feed supply chains. As I said, if we feed our livestock well, we are likely to attract a price premium that can be translated back to agro-pastoralists. That would increase the incentive to invest in feed. That would increase eventually climate security for communities. And there are all sorts of technologies out there that we can use. We have a whole digital agriculture unit that develops apps. Now, this is in India. Kenya is known for software programming and app development. And there are untapped opportunities to link consumers and producers also along further value chains along vast distances. And digital agriculture is certainly one way forward and one way to redesign the food system. I'm almost at the end. How do we do that practically? Well, first, we start with a system analysis, and that's often something we forget to do. We are always caught in action and start listing activities that we could implement together with farm organizations and the private sector. But the bigger question behind the activities is how is the food system configured? What are possible leverage and entry points that we could tap? I call those the acupuncture points. Yeah? If someone has headache, the first response is offering an aspirin. But maybe the entry point to the solution of the headache is elsewhere in the body. The same with food system. Yeah? We need to understand the system as it is, in its wholeness, and then find the right entry points for both the technologies and the software and the people, including the policies. Sometimes it requires change an institution, a bylaw to manage rangelands better, and an incentive to do that at community level. Second is niche experimentation. And the niche experiments are not demonstrations. These are learning laboratories where we would work with communities, the private sector, research partners to develop prototypes that can actually disrupt a conventional food system design. And remember, I've been saying that the food system is as good as its design. And these niche experiments and the disruptive pilots would eventually change what we can't just change through talking about it. Yeah, but it's practical action. And then the third one is co-innovation and scaling. And this is where the niche again meets the convention or the conventional mainstream, and then where the whole story becomes transformative. And that's what we all talk about, transforming agriculture. But often we don't know for what, and more importantly, how. Now, through niche experiments and disruptive pilots, we could engage in co-innovation and scaling and be part of that transformation. That's one of our hypotheses. So in conclusion, climate change is a reality, but there's an opportunity out there that would help us to redesign the food system, also in view of the United Nations Food System Summit, but not only for that. We, as a research organization, we're constantly looking for entry points in the system. We want to find the acupuncture points that we can tip to make that difference. And therefore, we don't target a specific community through our partners. But we look at the whole system and ask, what can we do differently with the entire system? That means changing relations, work relations, but also benefit sharing within the food system, and also as an attempt to make it more resilient to climate shocks. And design thinking, in my opinion, is one way forward to do that very practically. So, Mr. Chair, I'll stop here and hand back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Prof, for your response and also for the excellent presentation. There's something you've mentioned about improving the design of how we do everything. So during the Q&A session, maybe I might come back if we have some time. That is, I might come back so that you can shed some more lights on what you really mean by improving the design. So thank you very much, Prof. Prof. James Tutuek, your thoughts on the question? Prof. Tutuek.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm trying to share my screen. I hope I can.
There you are.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. I will spend a few minutes just to talk about land tenure systems and its effects on food production and food systems. Chairman, I'm trying to, that is what I'll go through very briefly in the next 10 minutes or so. Chairman, as you know, I now work for the National Land Commission. Something is wrong. Something is wrong here.
Just put it on slide. I think it's okay.
I'm trying it. I'm trying it.
Yeah, down there. Yeah.
Yes. Chairman, as you know, I work with the National Land Commission. The National Land Commission is established under Article 67 of the Constitution of Kenya, and we derive our mandate from the Constitution, the National Land Commission Act 2012, the Land Act 2012, and the Land Registration Act 2012, and other enabling statutes, and there are quite a number of them. Pursuant to Article 67.2, I'm just going to mention some of the functions. We have more than 10 functions, but for the purposes of today, I'm only going to be talking about 5. One is to manage public land on behalf of the national and county governments. 2, to recommend a national land policy to the national government. 3, to conduct research related to land and the use of natural resources and make recommendations to appropriate authorities. Chairman, this is an area which is of importance to the research community. Number 3, and I'll be talking a bit about that. Other functions which I have listed today include monitoring and have oversight responsibilities over land use planning throughout Kenya, and then perform any other functions prescribed by the law. Let me talk about recommending the national land policy. At the moment, we are operating under the National Land Policy 09, and this policy provides an overall framework on critical issues on land, including enacting, repealing, and enforcing legislation to ensure effective protection of land rights. In this policy, I'm trying to put off some other things here. and I'm not seeing where to. Anyway, the national land policy was a response to problems and challenges in the land sector in Kenya, which resulted from 1963 all the way to now. But the most important here was really a breakdown in land administration. That was the main problem. Breakdown, and I'll be elaborating what I mean by systemic breakdown in land administration, where people either were dispossessed of their lands, and people were not able to utilize their land, and they have been living as squatters. And the policy sought to unlock some of these factors. The overall objective was to secure land rights over land to enable growth and investment. Of course, why was this important? There was a rapid population growth, especially in the small farming communities. I've talked about systematic breakdown in land administration and inadequate participation of communities in governance and management of land and natural resources. These were the real things which has happened over the years, that a large population of Kenyans have sort of been sidelined completely when it came to land. So the key features of the policy were four. Actually, there were more. There were 5 mainly, but these are important policy issues. One was land tenure. These policy measures which were recommended in 09 was development of the Land Act to govern all aspects of land, all categories of land. The second policy issue was land use planning. And this one of the policy measures put in place or recommended in 09 was the development of the land use policy for spatial plans, for example. There was no policy as such in terms of how land should be used in Kenya. Of course, land could be categorized as agricultural, dwelling, and so forth, but there was no policy at all. So that was a policy issue. Land administration is to harmonize it and streamlining of the statutes relating to land administration. There were so many laws relating to land, and there was need to bring them into a few legislations. And then special interventions. These are historical land injustices, for example, because there are quite a number of historical land injustices in this country, which have not been resolved up to today. Of course, this I say this is the policy of 09. This policy was supposed to be in place for 10 years. So by 2019, it lapsed. And our work is, as I said, one of our functions is to recommend the national land policy. And we forward to the Ministry of Lands our recommendations. And this is what we did. The Commission actually recommended the policy changes or review for a new national land policy in 2019, forward to the ministry. The minister has already appointed a team, and currently this is in progress. What are the thematic areas which we have advised as National Land Commission to be included? We have retained land use planning as a theme. We have retained land tenure as a theme. Then we have also put in new aspects. That is the land information management system. You might be aware that the Ministry of Lands has been trying to digitize their land records with difficulties. So we want this to be really made successful in the next 2 or 3 years. It should be fully functional. The other thematic area is the thematic area of natural resources and environment. The other one is investment, infrastructure, and economy. This one is relating to compulsory land acquisition and setting aside land for investments to improve the economy. Then we have also recommended something on climate change as a theme to be included in the policy for 2020 going forward for the next 10 years. This is what the ministry is working on now based on our advice. Now, the next one is a categorization of land tenure. In this country, the constitution has categorized land into 3 categories. We have public land. This is land held by either county or national governments in trust for the people of Kenya. For example, the land you hold in Egerton University is public land, and you are holding that land in trust for the people of Kenya. ADC also has land, that's national. When I say, okay, public can be categorized into either national or held by county. So your land in Egerton is national. That's Chemeron, Bekatoni, Ngongogeri, and so forth. ADC is also national. But we also county. We have county lands, like lands within municipalities, that is county land. That's also public land, which can be leased to individuals. So that's the meaning of public land. All public land is on leasehold or can be leased to individuals or entities. Then we have community land. This is land in the communities where it has not been demarcated, but they are held by the community. And we have a Community Land Act, which defines how this land is to be managed. 65% of the land in Kenya is community land. This does not mean it is land which is ancestral. That's different. Community land is mainly found in pastoral areas, counties of Turkana, Marsabit, Wajir, all that, most of it is community land. And most of the land in Kenya is community land. Then we have private land. This is land being held by private individuals under freehold. So you can hold land as an individual under leasehold. So when the county government leases land to you, it becomes private land on leasehold. But when the lease expires, it automatically reverts back to the county or national government. But you can also hold the land as freehold. Freehold tenure is where people have, and most of the land in rural areas, in Kiambu, many places are freehold tenures. That's private land. There is also a provision that the parliament can also define what private land is. But for now, it is these 3 categories of land. How do these affect food systems or food production? Public land. This is of importance to you to know that some agencies are not utilizing the land for purposes for which they were allocated. And there are many. If you take ADC, for example, ADC is supposed to produce food. They hold more than 1 million acres of land. But are they using it for agriculture? I think that question is for you to answer, whether they are using it. The land, another example is, we have land in Egerton, Egerton University. Are you using the land for agriculture or for what purpose? So there is a lot of public land in Kenya which is not used optimally for food production, if it was agricultural land. So that's a major issue. Private land, similar. Some large chunks of land are lying idle, whether it's on leasehold or freehold. A lot of it is lying idle. So we need to ask ourselves, what do we do? And I think the policy issues in future will be, if you don't use land for the purposes for which it has been given to you, should that land be available to somebody else to use it for that purpose? Community lands, this one is mainly prone to numerous conflicts. There is an issue of trying to convert some of this land for agricultural, crop production, to some degree of success or failure, but there'll be conflicts because community land, the arrangement is different. If a community decides to put maybe 5,000 acres under some irrigation, is the whole community going to accept? So I think this is how it affects our productivity. Pastoral communities may not be interested in crop farming. They say, no, we'll take care of our livestock. And that's where the source of conflict is, especially in areas where there are several distinct communities in terms of this tribe versus that community, that clan versus that clan. It creates other problems. So that's how the land tenure affects food production. I talked about research and recommendations, and I say this is an area where we really need to work with the universities and research organizations. At the moment, first of all, we are supposed to do research. If you recall, our function is to undertake research on land and the use of natural resources and make recommendations to appropriate authorities. Let me give one example here, which we partnered with the FAO to do research on a pilot basis on the effects of land fragmentation in land use and food security in 13 pilot counties. Your county might not be there, but it's only a pilot. At the moment we are looking at this, what we would like to do as NLC is to make a recommendation at some point when we have enough data to the Ministry of Lands and Ministry of Agriculture and say, land in your area, the minimum land size should be this for agricultural purposes so that we can control land fragmentation. But this has to be supported by data, but we don't have enough data yet. The research is still going on and we would like to partner. Egerton University particularly is well placed because of the Tegemeo Institute. They have some data already and we can work to expand so that when we make a recommendation, it is informative. For these 13 counties, the data analysis is ongoing and we would like to partner with you on this as universities or any other person. We are also doing something else in the area of research and hopefully in the next few months, we will be able to put out a call together with NRF and we'll be working with universities to ensure that we do research in use of natural resources and also related inland. So let me stop here, Chairman, and what did I do? Okay, that was the objective of what I talked about. And I'll stop here, Chairman, and I'll be willing to ask to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair. Now I need to pull this down.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor James Tutoek. So audience, I think we are now moving to our next session, that is on Q&A. And you might have noted that we spent a lot of time in the presentation, and we have not more than 15 minutes for the Q&A. The way we are going to organize this is that I will first start by posing some questions, which I would expect all the members of the panel to respond to. And thereafter, because of time, then we'll simply give the audience an opportunity to ask at least one question to each member of the panel. So if I may go to my first question, we've been talking about all these different threats. We've listened to presentations on funding for research and development, and then we have an issue of food distribution and safety. And then we've listened to a presentation on climate change, and then there is now the issue of land. So when you look at those presentations, they are all of them tackling that very important aspects of the threats and challenges. But I was really trying to really listen very hard on just to listen and just to hear the word. There's a word that I was really waiting for, and that is COVID-19. And I didn't hear anything to do with COVID-19. So to the panelists, now how has this COVID-19 pandemic, how has it further aggravated the threats and the challenges that you presented today? So if we can start with the response from Dr. Oliver Huey, just to be brief, just 30 seconds response, and then we move to the next.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. And that's a very important question. And I think there is not a better way to put it, but to say that COVID-19 has completely affected the food systems in ways that it is unprecedented. I think from different forums and from different research that we've commissioned as an institute and as a project, we've really seen the implication of COVID-19 on food manufacturing industry, food and manufacturing and processing industries, first of all, to be very significant. We also saw that in terms of inputs, we've seen delays, we've seen the implications on what could be done on, the inputs, the fertilizer, for example, the seeds and so forth, that COVID-19 has delayed the delivery of the same. And maybe to a large extent, it has also increased the cost of inputs in almost every segment of commodity that you're looking at. So COVID-19, and I think I would say, I dare say that pandemics and the low-cost infestation and the challenges that are associated with climate change have really accelerated the challenges that we've already experienced. And in terms of funding, it's taken finances from, for example, key areas that we needed to finance, and now it's challenging, and we have reduced the amount of money that we could also put on R&D.
Good. Okay, thank you for that. Lucy Mchoki, what are the effects of COVID on food distribution and safety?
Thank you, Chairman. And indeed, that's very important. And we can't actually close without talking of what the pandemic, what lessons we have learned. I'm very happy that despite the very difficult time that we have all gone through, one thing that has come out clear is the human beings having been able to respond and come up with very innovative way of still maintaining and sustaining their businesses. I'm very happy that the digitalization is one way that we have managed to do the business and keep it going. And now we know that even from what we are doing here, discussing very important issues for the country and our continent, we don't have to go and meet physically, but we are sharing. So the digitalization and onboarding many businesses have become the norm. And we are seeing business going on despite the disruption, we are still doing business. So indeed, what this has taught us, the pandemic has taught us to think out of the box. And indeed, this is one area that I want to emphasize on. Moving forward, a lot of businesses are going to be done through this kind of platforms. And through the AFCFTA, Africa Free Trade, we have come up with a platform again. We are calling it Africa E-Trade, electronic trade, and we are onboarding people. So much is happening in the business arena. And of course, it's a response to the pandemic. And of course, I forgot to mention that we have been talking about, in terms of food safety, how to ensure we have the standards and continue building on the standards. And again, these are areas that we are collaborating between different countries, different nations. We had a meeting last week with the WTO, and we have really emphasized on the need to continue building the middle income in the middle income country, the low income countries like us, still using this digital. So I see this is a new and different way of doing business. And thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucy. Professor Hoyser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I partially agree with both Oliver and Lucy, but I think we have to have a differentiated view on commodities, markets, and regions. Perishable products obviously have been more at threat than cereals. So it depends a lot on the type of product and supply chain. And as Oliver mentioned, the attention has been drawn away from the real matters, and that's, I think, an underpinning issue we'd have to tackle, because rebuilding better is a phrase that we've all heard. But the question is, are we using COVID sufficiently well to rebuild our food system better? I have my doubts when it comes to regenerative technologies, for instance. We could actually incentivize the uptake of regenerative technologies using COVID as an opportunity. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor James, any effect of COVID on the land tenure policies? Professor Tutoek?
Perhaps he needs to unmute, maybe.
No, okay, I didn't hear you, Chairman. Sorry. I didn't hear you.
Okay, I'm saying any effect of COVID-19 pandemic on the land tenure policies?
We were really affected as a commission by the COVID-19. When the breakdown came, the measures which were put by the government, we scattered for nearly 2 months, and we couldn't do any work. Yeah. So a lot of things were put on hold, and there were delays out of this. And these delays we have not really managed to catch up, because up to today, we are now utilizing this technology a lot, which I think it was good. And with this pandemic, now we are able to meet online. And this is what we are doing here in the commission. A lot of our people are in the field, and we discuss our issues now mostly online and make decisions. But there are certain things which require us really to visit the ground, because if there is a dispute, sometimes we are also called upon to arbitrate disputes between public agencies and private agencies, or between public and public. For example, there could be a dispute between MTC, which is a national function, and a hospital, which is a county function, and they are not sure where the boundary should be. So this happens. It has affected us quite a bit, but I think with this technology, we are slowly coming back. We are not 100% back, but at least we are trying to catch up. So it has affected us, but technology also has really assisted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. I think, audience, you're aware that we are entering a political season. Kenya is very, very political, and the next year we are having our elections. And in this country, politics play a role in almost all spheres of our life. And you always say that what lacks is always the political will by the governments in Africa or in Kenya to allocate the NEPAD recommended levels of funding for research and development. And what do you suggest academics should do to lobby government to allocate more resources to research in agriculture and related fields? This is a question from Dr. Halkano Wario. So Oliver, what do you think we should do to lobby government to allocate more resources to research in agriculture?
Thank you, Prof.
Just
this is very, very significant, and I think I would say 3 sentences. The first one is that as researchers or as academia, we don't have lots of power to untwist the government and really push them that much. So what we need to do is show more evidence. And really, as I said, for example, $1 invested or 1 shilling invested, the returns would be up to 10, for example. So we need to bring more evidence on the table that investing in R&D is important. And then number 2, I think we need to tell governments and tell the politicians clearly that, your term in office might be 5 years, but the returns might be achieved already when you're out of office, but it is still a good thing to do. So that would be the second thing I would say. The last one is that we need to have more policy dialogues. I think as academia, we need to invite the policymakers, or we need to go to where policymakers are and make our case and show them what we found out.
Okay, thank you very much, Oliver. Lucy, how can the private sector work with the academics to lobby governments to allocate more resources?
First and foremost, I just like my previous colleague has just said, it's very important for the partners to see value in research. And I come from the background where I believe that we've all known that for you to make business, you must work with the research. So the case of research is very clear. And the only problem in the past has been the researchers not talking to the other partners and the private sector not knowing how to approach them. But right now, I am feeling happy that there's a lot of communication going between public and the private. As for the universities, definitely we need that youth and that driven research from the university is very key. We have noted clearly that there's a lot the universities have done in terms of the contribution to the GDP for the growth, at the same time in the new models of doing business. For instance, what I was talking about, digitization, which clearly is where the private sector have picked up from the research. If it's not the technology and the research continuing, we do not know where we would have been with this kind of pandemic that has really hit the private sector doing their daily business. So indeed, you see, you need to continue developing new ways of working, even during difficult times. And indeed, the government, in the end of the day, depends on the private sector for their taxes. So here is a tripartite arrangement where each one of us needs the other. If the government does not support the R&D and the private sector is not able to build businesses, then where are they going to get their taxes from? So indeed, I realize and I see a very straightforward way of working together, each of us needing one another. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor Michael Hoyser, any suggestions?
Well, Prof, I can't talk about Kenyan or African politics, but I can talk about European politics. Yeah. And there's something we learned in Europe from Africa. You need a whole village to raise a child. In other words, to change a policy in the European Union and its members, you need more than the academics. You need strong farm organizations. You need consumers aware of what they are eating. You need a food movement. And it's that combined effects of all these various players with a lot of agency that drive policy change. And I think there's something we can learn from each other in this regard. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Professor James Tutoek, now that you've been in the university, you are now with the government body. Any suggestions?
Chairman, I think where we are doing very poorly as an academia is that we are not really engaging policymakers. Sometimes when you talk to policymakers, they blame the academia for not reaching out to them.
Yeah.
But I've also told them they also do not listen to academia. They don't respect their views.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to work on that disconnect to make sure we are engaging more productively. Chairman, there is a committee in Parliament and also in the Senate, Committee on Agriculture. And I believe agricultural universities, and I'm going to give the example of Kenya, the agricultural universities in Kenya should really engage this committee more or less on a full-time basis, so that anytime they need information, they come to you and say, what do we do? Because they are always faced with questions. For us in the Committee on Land, and this is what I've seen, the Committee on Land, both in the Senate and the National Assembly, are very actively engaging with the National Land Commission and the Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning. And it has worked very well because we are solving problems nearly every month. There is an issue, and we sit down together and look for a solution, and we move on. I think agriculture, based on that experience, the Agriculture Committee is not utilizing the universities and CALRO. To a little extent, they call Minister of Agriculture when there is a problem only. So my suggestion is, for agricultural universities, let us utilize the parliamentary committees in Kenya, the Senate and the National Assembly, and they are available. I know we go there once in a while when we want funding, but that's not the issue. I think it is to change policy. I'm encouraging, especially Egerton, because of Tegemeo. Because of Tegemeo, make sure you use this kind. They listen to you if you engage them. Call the chairman, discuss, have a breakfast meeting, discuss, and then make it an habit of meeting them perhaps 3 times a year, 4 times a year, every quarter. Then they will say, they'll start inviting you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. We are just about to conclude this session, and I only have one question for each of the panelists, and I will start with Dr. Oliver Kirui. There is no doubt that investment in research and development in agriculture is key to its growth, and that there is need for partnership. However, the concern is, how does one manage conflict of interest between public and private partnership to ensure the interests of Kenyans are prioritized? Dr. Oliver Kirui, just briefly. You are muted.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prof, again. So it's important. I think public-private partnerships are really key, and they're important, especially in this era of financing. We've seen this not just in R&D, but also in infrastructure, in almost every aspect of investments today. What I would suggest, and my thoughts would be that we need to have very clear policies and regulations, perhaps legislation on how, for example, the intellectual property rights products and outputs will be shared between the different partners, but also the intended beneficiaries. I think it's key to think from the beginning. How do we bring in the the beneficiaries on board? And I also think that the biotechnology and genetic resources must be guided. The application of this must really be guided by enforceable policies and regulations. So we need to have policies on how do you apply biotechnology as a company, and suppose there is spillover effects, how do we deal with it? How are you penalized? If it is very heavy penalties, then companies will be very careful not to misuse those properties. And finally, I think we need to improve public awareness and participation in the whole process. So we need to bring on board people from the beginning. They need to be aware, what are these biotechnologies? What are these private public partnerships that we have? And how are they expected to benefit from them?
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirui. And the next question is specifically to Lucy Mchoki. Most small-scale farmers are exploited by middlemen due to lack of available and cheaper methods of transporting the produce to the market. And kindly, what is your organization doing to alleviate this? Just briefly, Lucy.
Thank you, Chairman. And we need first to acknowledge that there are middlemen who actually do legit work, and we need to appreciate the role they also play. Not all middlemen are exploiters. However, there's a lot that is going on, and there's a lot that we are involved in currently in terms of ensuring that there is that connection between the end user and the farmers. Currently, if I look at the model, the Trigger Foods have embraced how you're putting up aggregation centers so that you can be able to get the farmers to work directly with the end user. These are the new methods that are coming up, putting up those aggregation centers at the same time utilizing the digital processes. That using the digital every single day, you'll be able to know there's potatoes in Nyandarua at this price. This is a new ways, and I see a lot of requirement or demand for continued research. And this is where I see university and the young people coming in, all the time working on the new technologies and improving and making them better. And as my colleague said, yes, we are rebuilding better. So this is a time to put up these technologies that are helping us, not just saving the farmer, but also making us deliver in a more better way, faster, efficient, at the same time ensuring that there's a lot of communication going down between and the feedback. Asante sana.
Thank you very much. Professor Hoysa, there was a project by the Kenyan government to convert dry lands in northern Kenya into an arable land. Kindly, how successful is this likely to be, and how is research coming in handy to help the government towards this end? Briefly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did respond to that in writing. So it is in the chat box. I just picked up water as one important factor, and yeah, I invite everyone to have a read through that. But if you allow me to just reflect on the bigger question of private-public, I think the division of labor is very clear. The private sector, people like Lucy and Trigger Food and others, they should do the business, and the public sets the framework conditions, gets the rules and regulations right in an accountable manner. And certainly disentangling private interest from politics in Europe is an important driver of this transformation that we would like to see. And that also applies to attempts to change rangelands and fragile ecosystems in northern Kenya into arable land. Yeah, that's all I can say at this point.
Okay, thank you. Because of time, I think I will not ask. Remember, I talked about what you had said, improving the design of how we do things. Because of time, I think let me not follow that, but I think we can continue communicating so that we really learn more on what you really meant by improving the design of how we do things. So, Professor James Tutoek, there is one question for you here. That land is a political issue, and I will add to it, it is political and it is also emotive. And what is the Commission doing to depoliticize land issues?
Continuous politicization of land, because every Kenyan believes they need to own land. And when you think about it, Chairman, it is already in the mind. So we need to address the mind that we don't need land. Some of the people in this country, they own land not for productive purposes or not for anything. They own land just so that they can be buried there one day. So really, why do you own 10 acres and you will only be buried in 3 by 6? So I think we need to decolonize the mind that we don't own land. The second issue, and I think these are policy issues, that is now decolonizing, which is education. The second one is a policy issue. To say, why does one need to own land? You need to own land for a purpose. And the purpose is for you to live in, that is your dwelling place, or you need to use it for agriculture, or you need to use it for an industry, or use it for whatever. That's the main reason. And perhaps policy-wise, and this one is very difficult to do it, policy-wise is to say, if you are not using land for that particular purpose, if you don't use it for 3 years for that purpose, the state should take the land. But you see, that is now the policy, which is a very difficult policy, because the policymakers themselves, they own land and they continue to want to own more land, and you are telling them, let us change the policy. It is very difficult. It will be there. The third point is land is politicized maybe during election time. It is politicized in the sense that you do not want certain people to vote against you. So what you do is to cause problems and say, after all, this is our land, these people should get out of this place. Not for any reason, but just because you don't want them to vote for your opponent. So you sort of displace them. That's now politicizing the whole thing. So it is a complex issue. It involves the mind, it involves the policy, and it involves the politics. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor James Tutoeb, for the excellent response. I think, members, this has been a very valuable discussion. Because of time, I think I will just stop it here. And I'm happy that we've really achieved our purpose. And you are aware that we had members of the panel coming from different organizations. And from their presentation, they all agree that our food system is under threat and might not be sustainable in the long run. And this calls for concerted efforts. And I would like to underscore the importance of collaboration, of linkages, and also of engagements to the delivery of the mandates we set out to achieve. Now, as we really seek to really understand how these food systems and entrepreneurship will efficiently lead to sustainable development, we must really acknowledge that a lot of sustainable progress so far witnessed has been because of collaboration, has been because of linkages, has been because of partnership. So we see more room for collaboration between higher education institutions, and with this, I mean the universities and the TVETs. We see more collaboration between this institution and policymakers, key industry players, and I'd like to add another group of people, and these are the community, in what we call now this time, you remember earlier we had talked about a triple helix that ignored the community. But in this particular time, we are looking at what we call a quadruple helix platform. So the milestones that lead to the development of sustainable food systems and also that lead to entrepreneurial growth and the development can only be attained if we concert efforts, if we pull towards the same direction through specialization in our areas of strength. So let me take this opportunity to acknowledge the progress that we've made and to thank all the participants. So panelists, you have given us some great tips and techniques. And to the audience, to the participants, thank you for your questions and also thank you for your thoughts on this very important topic. At this particular point, I think I now call upon the organizers to proceed from there. So thank you very much, participants and the members of the panel. I rest my case.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be leaving in the next 5 minutes for something else, but I wish to congratulate Egerton University for this forum. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Over to Professor Nancy Mungai.
Thank you for the panel discussion. We are now going to invite reflections from Professor Paul Kibuto.
Thank you, Chair. I will be very brief to summarize the presentations from the start of the first presenter. We've listened to 5 presenters today, 2 keynote speakers, and 4 panelists, which we've just finished. So I will quickly start with the first presenter, which was Professor Darius Andika. He was talking to us on the contribution of emerging food systems to food security, and he brought around 4 or 5 key points. That understanding the concept of food system is still unclear, especially in the middle of the value chain. That's why it may be breaking most of the time, linking productivity and consumption. Hunger and nutrition are still a global problem, especially in Africa, and the global food system is increasingly becoming vulnerable. And this cuts across all the presentations up to what we listened on the contribution on land in making food systems vulnerable. And therefore, he suggested 5 pathways, especially on emerging food systems to enhance food security. 1, investment in research and development, which I think it has been said across all the presenters. And we also need to fix fundamentals in the food system. Marketing infrastructure, which already been talked about, to support inclusive market value change and developing the rural infrastructure. The open, transparent, and fair trade. I think he mentioned something about the brokers who really take much of the benefit, including in most of the food chains. And we are seeing a lot of disagreements among farmers and the cooperatives, and even some of the actors in the value chain on the benefit that go to the farmers. And he suggested that the current traditional food crops are becoming very important in the emerging food systems, and therefore we need to empower women in agriculture. And he mentioned the need for monitoring and evaluation of the food systems. It was a very insightful presentation, and I think all of us listened to him. The second keynote speaker was Dr. Amudavi, and David Amudavi was talking about the key political factors in improving food systems and sustainability. He actually started with giving us 3 questions on the political economy and food sovereign questions. 1, who controls the food system? Who benefits from the current organization of the food systems? And what are the obstacles to change? And he gave us a wide presentation on figures and numbers, including industrial agriculture investments, which he said 48% go to industrial agriculture. And of course, that does not actually include the smallholder farmers who contribute a lot in terms of food systems. So he went ahead to give us quite a number of figures, but he concluded by saying that in the key political factors that control the food system are the funding modalities. When you look at the key, even in Kenya, where does funding go for the key value chains, and who are in those value chains? It may not be the small-scale farmers he alluded to. The second one was on structural inequalities and power imbalances. And he was very categorical that if this is not going to be changed, then we are not going to improve on the political contribution of political factors in food systems. The other one was on power in food chains, and he mentioned including the 10% Malabo declaration, and indicated many countries don't do beyond 2.5%. And he also talked about territorial considerations in institutional actors, and the most important, which he said we need to emphasize, is on multi-level governance. This is where the processors, the food handlers are also in. And the last one, he said, we must avoid the short-term strategies and go for the long-term, because the long-term will give us quality analysis, and we need to avoid the classical models and bring in innovative models. So he actually gave us quite a number of recommendations, which I think I could share to the organizers, but they were quite impressive, including we need to go beyond. In Kenya, for example, floriculture is the leading globally, but is it being controlled by the small-scale farmers? He posed several questions on our food systems in Kenya. So I think there were quite a number of issues issues that came out on that part of the political economy. The next was the panel discussions, and we had 4 panel discussions. But before then, I think he invited Egerton and commended Egerton on several areas. One is that this forum is quite elaborate and is bringing quite a number of participants, including people who may bring in innovative ideas on changing and reviewing the extension program. He talked about the consumer education, which we may not be having. Being an extension expert, he invited Egerton to really change the program and be able to include some of the things that are key among consumer education, so that the extension staff can be able to be effective. We went to the 3 panel discussions, and the first one was from Dr. Oliver Kirui. He talked about the R&D, and before then, Kai actually had mentioned 3 things that were very key. What are the threats? He talked about COVID-19, climate change, and insecurity, which is actually includes cattle rustling. And it has been linked by the last presenter, Professor Twitoek, that it is actually linked to land tenure systems in Kenya. So Oliver gave us the links or what is happening in the UN food systems 2021, 5 areas which were very important for all of us, including resilience and vulnerability in strengthening resilience and vulnerabilities in the food system, which goes all the way to the small scale farmers. He gave us very good figures, and finally, he gave us 4 key areas. What do we need to do in R&D investment to enhance sustainable food systems? One, he said we need to increase funding. It doesn't matter which country, investment in R&D should increase to enhance stronger international partnerships, and we need to target not only funding, but innovative funding strategies to agriculture. It challenged us to amplify the benefits of R&D, investments to private sector, to NGOs, and he gave an example of Germany, where even the private sector and farmers and even NGOs contribute funding to the institutes because they know the value. So I think that is one of the key things that he said, and it was mentioned by the last panelist, that we need to be talking to policymakers. So amplifying the benefits of R&D. He said $1 will bring $3, and it can go even up to $10. The third one was improving agricultural research centers and extension providers. He gave very innovative ways, including monitoring of locusts, the newest outputs, and these are some of the things that the R&D, including ourselves in the university, need to do. Lucy Muchoki talked about food safety and distribution, and she gave us good compliments on two areas of our undergraduate and postgraduate students where they interacted with her. She was working with industry as on attachment and placement, and the second group was a master's for practical contribution in industry. And she clearly mentioned that the students, some of the students are doing very well in big organizations. She gave an example of Bayer East Africa, Bayer, where some of the students she interacted with and trained practically are senior people and contributing. And the second one was the master students who have impacted positively on juice and potato based on university agribusiness innovation and solutions that contribute to sustainable food systems. So I think this is an area which she invited us to participate closely with the private sector, but she mentioned other key things. One, policy is a problem, that laws are there in Kenyan system, but they are not policies, which I thought it is it links to CAPS, where they only inspect and they don't add any value, and they reject, and the same food will go back to the market. So how do we improve the policy so that the food that has been rejected by the law doesn't reach the market? Or how do we improve that? She also gave suggestions on health. Ministry of Health and Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Health is receiving a lot of money to buy medicine, but those medicine could have been resolved using health food. So it's food for thought. How do we avoid hospitals by eating well? And how do we invest the money instead of going to KEMSA to come to agricultural sector? She also mentioned the importance of food safety at the beginning. And she talked about seed, which we know, and health seed will lead to diseases and then eventually lead to poisonous food. So she was very categorical and gave an example of AvlaSafe, which is a research product, and therefore R&D is still important. And she mentioned about storage. She highlighted the indigenous knowledge as one of the ways of how the research can come in and utilize indigenous knowledge and transfer it back to the industry. And of course, capacity of farmers. And the most important and exciting to me is the 80% SME who distribute our food, and we don't care about them. So that was one of the things that we need to. Food systems cannot work if SME who transport our milk, who handle our grain in the markets and from the farms are not addressed well. And you can imagine how dirty those people who drive motorbikes, the people who drive tennis, and all that food, tomatoes, onions, we go into the market and buy them, even if you are coming from a very clean office. So I think Lucy was very practical in the food safety and was very impressed on some of the, including once this area is improved, it will attract youth and women. Michael was also talked to us about the impact of climate variability on sustainable food systems, and he was very keen on the high level thinking, and he quickly agreed with Abu Dhabi on the political power. But he gave us 3 risks: production risks, circulation risks, and conflict, which is the main disincentive that breaks the sustainable food system. But he gave ICRISAT's contribution globally and in Africa, but he concluded by emphasizing three core thrusts, which are very key in enhancing food systems. Multi-purpose dry land cereals and legumes, which cuts across the value chain from germplasm to communication, including digitalization of the feed supply. He gave an example of Ethiopia. The second one was integrating farms and landscapes to increase diversification, which was already mentioned by Amudavi as the second in terms of diversifying our food. He also talked about product development, value chain, and business. But he gave three key things that we must innovate through thinking. And I think the chair already picked that, and I'm sure it was one of the ways that was very system analysis, and he also talked about co-innovation, experimenting and piloting to transform the systems. The last one was Professor Tuitaek, which he talked about the effect of land tenure policies on agri-food systems, and he highlighted the importance of National Land Commission. He gave us 5 points out of 10 functions of the Land Commission. Among them is oversight and also research. He talked about the policy that was there from 2009 and the new policy. And one of the problems that he mentioned is system breakdown in the land registration, where land can be divided without questioning, where agricultural land can be converted into settlement. And this has led to several squatters coming up. So the population growth is also a problem, he mentioned, and therefore he talked about land tenure, land use planning, land administration, and historical injustices. And he posed several questions. One, is it that when you have a lot of land, there's a lot of private land, can it be taken away from you? Can you surrender? He also talked about community conflicts, and he invited us to do research with the Land Commission, and he gave examples of FAO, and this is what we could do, especially Egerton with Tegemeo. So I think he gave very good insights on support in fragmentation and the possibility of enhancing, utilizing land properly for improving food systems. And I think this is key in terms of even the politics of this country. Chairman, I think those are the key points and highlights from this session. And I would also want to most sincerely thank TAGDEP and the Forum for organizing the fourth forum from Egerton, which has really been increasing and attracting more and more partnership and contribution. Thank you so much. And yeah, those were the summaries I picked in the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Kimurto, for the reflections which you've given on the discussions that we had this morning. And those reflections brings us to the end of this fourth National Forum. My duty now is to give a vote of thanks to all the people who have contributed to these successful discussions that we've had over the past 2 days. Today we had two keynote speakers, Professor Darius Andika from Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, and Dr. David Mulama Amudavi from, who is the Executive Director Pan-Africa, that is the Executive Director BioVision Africa Trust, who gave us the keynote address. I would also like to thank the panelists who contributed in the panel discussion, where we had Dr. Oliver Kirui from the University of Bonn. We also had Ms. Lucy Muchoki, the CEO, Pan-Africa Agro-Industry Consortium, Dr. Professor Hausa Michael from ICRISAT, and Professor James Twitoek from the National Land Commission. Thank you for your time and insight into different aspects affecting food systems and entrepreneurship for sustainable development in Kenya. I would also like to thank the moderators of these two sessions. The first session was moderated by Professor Charles Ntorimba, and the second session, which was moderated by Professor Alexander Kahi. I would also like to thank the TAGDEV coordinator, Professor Nancy Mungai, and Professor Wilkista Muturi for their contribution at the start with the recap and also some insight into the second day of the National Forum. Also, I would like to thank Professor Paul Kimurto for the reflections, which has given us a summary of what has been discussed this morning. And this has given us at least an opportunity for those who may not have been able to follow up on all the discussions to have at least a take-home on what was discussed in the two sessions. I would also like to thank the different partners who have made this national conference possible, starting with the MasterCard Foundation, Ruforum, the Gulu University, and Egerton University for this partnership that has enabled us to have the National Forum and discuss on issues pertaining to food security, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. In addition, I would also like to thank the COELIP team and the TAGNEV Coordinating Committee for their contribution and input that resulted in the success of this fourth National Forum. With those remarks, we have reached the end of the second day session. Thanks to all the participants who attended the sessions today and also yesterday for your time, engagement in questions, and also contribution to different aspects that has made this conference successful. Thank you.
Often seen as a place confined in time. Hardly do we think about the feelings of a community, accomplishment, promise, and belonging that comes with it. At Egerton University, we find your passions, your dreams, aspirations, and water them through fruitfulness. We help you find yourself and mold you into an all-round individual. Experience professionalism, experience practicality, experience fun, experience Egerton University. To apply for our programs, please visit application.egerton.ac.ke. Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education.